Well, welcome. I want to welcome everyone to the public hearing and the Board of Finance meeting on the budget for 21-22. We are sorry that once again we're doing this virtually. We always like the opportunity to see everybody together in the same room. Some of us remember and miss the old days when you would actually have a town meeting and you could literally have to stand up and be counted, but those days are gone. So we have significant participation tonight, which is always welcome. We appreciate that. And so we have many guests on the line. We have many more that are watching, I'm sure, on television this evening. So let me call the meeting to order and we can begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let me give sort of an outline of how this is going to go tonight. We're going to start with some slide presentations by the Board of Finance, the Board of Education, and the Board of Selectmen that will outline the budgets that are included in the information that went out with this notice of the public hearing. Following that, we will have a public hearing that will begin with live presentations. We have roughly a dozen people who have asked to speak, and we will do those live. And then we have a long stack of people who have submitted in writing, and we will have an abbreviated review of those submissions. I'll tell everyone right now that all of the items that were submitted are currently on the website for the town in their entirety. If you go to the Board of Finance and then scroll down to our agendas and look for the comment submissions, you'll see everything that people submitted in writing there in their entirety. When we're done with the comments, there will be a Board of Finance discussion about these budgets, and then hopefully a decision will either be made or not made as to whether these will then be sent to referendum. So that's the outline. There's a lot of great participation tonight, and without any further ado, let us start with the presentation. Be sure you're on mute if you're not speaking. That'd be very helpful for everybody. So first up will be a presentation by me of the, and this summarizes basically what I just told you. So this will be the budget process overview, and then we'll do Board of Ed and then Board of Selectmen in the public hearing. Next, Melissa. So some of these slides are familiar. We've given a little more detail on a couple of them, but the result that we're discussing tonight is a result of months of work interactively between three boards that work together with different points of view on the same task, which is to provide services to the town and to our children for the schools. And these boards are volunteer boards, longtime volunteers and elected officials on these boards. The Board of Selectmen provides services to town, which includes police, library, public works, recreation, and other things plowing our roads. Board of Education, same thing. Great volunteers, great staff that work for the town, provide the best education to students, and try to do so in an efficient manner that it provides enrichment and other things that we are encouraged to do with access for special needs and to maintain our excellent reputation of the Simsbury schools. The Board of Finance role in this process is to help maintain the town's strong credit rating. We need to balance the budget So we have to pay for the things that that we collectively decide to put into both our operating and our capital budgets, and to ultimately set the mill rate that sets what the taxes are that our taxpayers will pay. We do this all for an overlapping set of stakeholders, which includes the taxpayers themselves, citizens who use the services, and the students and teachers that are in our schools, both working and learning. As I said, the Board of Finance's Citizen Oversight Board, one of our responsibilities is to conduct this public hearing, the proposed budgets. We truly are interested in your opinions on these things that we consider. We don't work in a vacuum. We'd be glad to hear from you, but we have lots of things that we need to consider as we put these budgets together. The Board of Finance needs to approve both the budgets that are created by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education. And we do that interactively, working with those boards, reviewing what their recommendations are, making suggestions, and then ultimately coming up with the proposed budget for the referendum. The mill rate is a calculation we'll go through in a minute, but it has to be sufficient to pay all of the expenses of the town. And then from time to time, things don't go like we planned, and so we're here to approve supplemental or emergency appropriations, make mid-year adjustments if necessary. All right. One of our big responsibilities is the pension trusts for the employees of the town and the other post-employment benefits. So we had several criteria for this year. One of them was to continue to help manage through the pandemic. About a year ago, when we had these meetings, we were, I think, still in shock over the severity and very unclear about how long the recovery would be, both from the illness and the economic. I think there's still a fair amount of uncertainty about that, and so that continues. Kudos to everyone who helped us manage through all of this, and I think we have a much better perspective about it this year. But that perspective includes not being naive about how long and how severe the impact of this pandemic and the economic fallout from that has been. One of our big challenges is to make sure that we are paying for the pension promises that we've made. And so one of the things that we did this year, and we've been talking about for a number of years, is being sure that we have the assumption right so that we're paying currently what we need to be sure that the pensions themselves are going to be funded when the people, it's time to pay during their retirement. Debt service will be a topic you'll hear quite a bit about tonight. The town has undertaken, both at the Board of Ed and through the Board of Selectmen, long-range planning for the capital needs of the town. And some of these projects have very large price tags. And when we do that, we need to figure out how to pay for them, bond them, and then have that the impact of that hits usually 1 or 2 years after the decision is made. And then it can last anywhere from 10 to 15, sometimes 20 years. And so you'll hear discussion about that tonight. And then we'll set the appropriate mill rate, which we think recognizes both some of the hardships that our taxpayers and town people have felt, as well as the needs of the town to provide the services we have. We're very proud of a very successful bond offering that we've done this year. Kudos to our staff for another great job with that. And we maintained our AAA rating, which is essential to financing the operations of the town. And then we want to use reserves wisely so that we can be sure we can weather any kind of storm, but also smooth the taxes and minimize surprises. And again, continue to work collaboratively between the town management and the boards that we interact with. So again, AAA rating, the rating is based on a number of factors, including our collection rate, how strong our reserves are, how collectible our taxes are, which are very high, and that we have a balanced and modest outlook towards debt and covering our pension and other liabilities. Here's a history of the mill rate. Last year we were at 37, or the current year we're at 37.09, and the budget that was sent to you to review tonight proposes a 37.46 mill rate. This is exclusive of the fire district. And we've had 21-year recipient of the Excellence in Financial Reporting Award. So our job is to balance the budget. The way we do that is we try to make sure that the expenses are manageable, and that we then turn around. And so the expenses are our Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen, debt service, and non-public schools. And then the money to pay for these bills comes from property taxes, automobile taxes, state and federal grant and aids, and then the fees that we charge for certain services. One of the things that we're looking at constantly is the combination of the mill rate and the grand list. We actually experienced some significant grand list growth this year. And that 2.93% was a culmination of projects, new projects in town, the apartment buildings and complexes, the long-term care facilities, the solar farm, and other developments. But I'm quick to remind everyone that grand list changes are lumpy, and our forecast going forward is that the mill rate will, or the grand list will be pretty flat going forward, even as you go out into further years. We're not expecting that kind of jump every year. And so when it comes, it's helpful, but it's not something that we can routinely plan for. So again, this is just algebra. You get to the amount of taxes you pay by multiplying the mill rate times the assessed property value. And the other way to think about it is that we get to a mill rate by looking at the total amount that we have to that is assessed property, and what taxes we do, and dividing by the assessed value. So these are the proposed budgets. You're going to hear details of these from both the Board of Ed and the town. We had at our tri-board meeting in November asked them, both boards, to try to keep a cap on increases in operating expenditures at 1.5. That proved extremely difficult. And you'll hear some of the reasons and drivers for that as they present their budgets. Next. The budget drivers were contractual salary increases. Again, the Board of Finance was keenly focused on pension and OPEB obligations, paying currently for what we think the future obligations will be, debt service for existing and future projects, and then some service improvements. And then the things that changed is that I think when we originally gave our guidance, we weren't expecting quite the same increase that we realized in the grand list. And then we've modified the assumptions for the pension so that we are paying more currently to keep in line with what the future liability for the pension obligation is. So the expenditures, 106 million, and the revenues, the property taxes. That's what we're dealing with. That we won't set the mill rate until after the referendum, but the mill rate I showed earlier is the proposed mill rate that would equalize revenues with expenditures. All right, and so that's the 37.46. So 1% increase over where we were last year, and that impact on a medium $300,000 house is $80 a year. So one of the things I mentioned earlier, long-term planning and choices. So we've been engaged in long-term planning for the schools and for the town for several years. When you look at our budget for this year, you need to also consider what the impact of decisions made this year are on subsequent years. And when we look at the bonding necessary for the capital projects and the capital improvement plan that has been put forth by both boards for the long term, we start to bump up against the cap that we had previously set. One of the things the Board of Finance needed to do was look at how we fund long-term projects like the Latimer Lane School, Meadowwood, and other projects that are projected. And we had been working under a cap of 7%. The Board of Finance, after serious consideration, agreed to change our policy to allow for a range of debt service as a percentage of the annual budget to be between 6 and 8%. And the goal really is to only get to the 8% when the largest projects are on for a short period of time. And you'll see in a minute how, on the following chart, how that is impacted. So capital projects approved today impact debt service for years in the future. And if we can't be naive about the fact that there'll be other projects coming. They're in the plan. Some of them will come up even that aren't already in the plan. And they will further impact our ability to pay for the debt service that goes with that. Projects that are approved tonight won't be bonded for a couple of years. So just because we're in a good position this year relative to debt service, we are putting into future budgets obligations that will need to be paid. And in order to get to that revised cap of 8%, tough choices have already been made on which projects to move forward and which ones to delay or remove. So there's always a choice, a trade-off. We don't just have a wish list of all the things we want to do, either operating-wise or capital-wise. We need to look at each of them, and the boards do this. The Board of Ed does this, the Board of Selectmen does it, prioritizes projects, and then brings them to us, and we need to make them fit into our model. So Melissa, if you go to the next chart. We've been showing this chart for several years. It's a little bit hard to understand, but if you pay just a little bit of attention, the bars at the bottom in color are represent the issuances of debt, and the black is the debt we've already issued. The lime green, or not lime green, what we call khaki green, is the issuance that we will do in fiscal 23 for things that we have purchased or obligated ourselves already in the 21-22 timeframe. The Latimer Lane issuance doesn't really hit till the 24 fiscal year. That's the bright pink. And it layers in on top of the other. And this is where we start to get into that going above our target line. Our original target line was 6.7 and with a goal of staying under 7. When you move the line up to 8, when we do the second issuance for Latimer Lane, that's the light pink, we come right up to the 8% line. And then in fiscal 25, we have other projects that are in the capital improvement plan that require bonding. And that issuance in 25 will push us right up to the 8% level. And then after that, it falls off again. But if you know and have been paying attention, the Board of Ed's long-range plan is to do other projects in this time frame. We're looking out now to 2030, 2035. One of the things that was moved was Henry James, the 6th grade at the Henry James, that with the 2 burnt orange and light orange. They're not on here because they would have put us above the 8% line, and in fact, actually go all the way up to above the 10% line. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of hard choices having already been made. And there are other projects that keep getting pushed out. All right. So we want you to know with all sincerity that the Board of Finance is here to listen to the comments of the public, to listen to these budgets. We've been reviewing and thinking and talking about them for months. We're close to the finish line. We want to hear what the town has to say about these budgets. we will not actually read the every one of these emails, or 175 roughly emails that were sent, but we will summarize them. And again, as I said, they are posted. They've been posted all day today. The Board of Finance received them today, and our members have read them. And certainly we'll have them available to be read as we consider the questions. All right. And then our decision will be made after the presentations of the other two boards. And I will introduce Susan to go first.
Hi there. Thanks so much for setting us all up there, Rob. And I just want to begin tonight's presentation by just saying how happy I am to be able to share with the town all the hard work that the Board of Education has done, and how grateful we are to all of our teachers and administrators and paraprofessionals and custodians and every person in the building who has worked so hard to get our kids back and do it so successfully over the school year. So I couldn't begin tonight without at least saying a shout out to all concerned, and to Matt and his team for their great leadership in this incredibly stressful year. With that said, we can dig into the slides. So, our presentation begins with a look at our four guiding principles that the Board of Education consistently referred to in our reopening plan in the fall. These same four principles help to guide our decision making during the budget process, which has been a year of challenges and problem solving for everyone. This evening, I will be happy to provide you with background information. Can we advance the slide? Sorry. This evening, I'll provide you with background information on contextual factors that impact our budget, such as enrollment and our strategic priorities. I will hit on the main financial drivers that represent the majority of our costs. The Board of Education budget represents a cost increase of $1.3 million, or 1.85% increase over last year's spending. It is certainly important to understand the balancing act required this year so that our planning for next year's budget could be successful. If we could advance the slide, great, thank you. The district has incurred more major expenses related to the pandemic this year, which are listed on the left-hand side of the slide here. As a result of savings on the prior year and federal dollars that we received through different CARES Act and such, as well as the current year freeze on non-essential accounts, we have a plan to ensure that we balance the budget. We spent significant time reviewing enrollment projections in our district as they relate to both staffing and facility needs. As you can see, we project an increase of 60 students over our current K-12 enrollment, with increase related to K-6 particularly. Our K-12 enrollment is projected to increase by an average of 40 students a year over the next 5 years. So this is a reversal of the downsizing we've been seeing. Balancing our fiscal reality. If we can move to the next slide. One more. Every year our district works very hard to balance the current fiscal environment with our vision for continuous improvement. And this year is no different. We certainly took into account the effect of the pandemic on the state and local economy, as well as the mill rate pressures we all feel. And we tried to balance that against the personalized learning opportunities we want to provide, the access and equity intervention models, as well as the social emotional health supports for our students and staff. The primary goal of our planning process this year was to ensure we rebuild the intervention and support systems that were in place prior to the pandemic. In an effort to service the needs of our distance learners this year, we repurposed current staff members' roles to teach online or in the classrooms. And you can see those numbers here, 16.6 positions repurposed for this school year, as well as added positions to reduce class size due to COVID. These staff members will be an integral part of supporting our students as we address any learning gaps, and will be returning to these key positions when we reopen in the fall to provide for student interventions. So now to the nitty-gritty, the major drivers of our budgets. This graphic represents our largest budget driver, which is our personnel costs. Contracts represent an increase of more than $1.5 million over last year's budget, and an increase of 2.07%. The teacher contract represents an increase of $1.3 million and is our largest employee group. We were able to offset those increases each year by reducing the savings associated with retirements. And when you net those two numbers out, our personnel increase is 2.07%. Listed here are several areas during our planning process that provided offsets to our operating increase. Reduction of 5 non-certified positions in K-12 due to enrollment, and that's mostly at the higher grades. Reduction through known staff retirements, administrative restructuring. So with the retirement of Erin Murray and Burke LeClaire, we were able to take advantage of a restructure there. Instructional supply reduction and equipment reduction. On this slide, you're going to see some additions, and that would be the Director of Equity and Access. This has been a priority of the board for the last 2 years, and we really feel that this is the time to move that position forward. It would help greatly in our district to have somebody who can spearhead that work. And then again, as I mentioned, with the retirement of Burke LeClaire, our business manager, and Erin Murray, the assistant superintendent for teaching and learning, there was a restructuring done at the central office, and we were able to gain some savings there. And you'll also see that we're working on our non-certified staffing and reducing that number as well. Program improvements and enhancements. So Simsbury High School's summer programming for student supports, elementary intervention supports, and summer programs. These are 2 key areas we want to focus on this summer to help address the kids who have been out of school for so long and any gaps that we may have in learning. Reinstituting the Simsbury reading intervention model, math coaching, and language arts consultants and staff. Everything on this slide is really critical to moving our kids forward the best way possible come next September. This slide summarizes the main drivers of the budget. The additions portion of the slide at the top represents the value of fixed contracts, new staffing requests that we discussed, and an increases in insurance. In total, these costs are 2.79% increase over last year's operating expenses. When we account for the value of retirement savings and staffing reductions, as well as a reduction in equipment spending, we reduce the overall increase by $700,000 and present a 1.85% increase for the school board budget. And that's my portion. To review our 3 capital projects that are out there, I'm going to pass this off to Jason Casey and Neil Sullivan.
All right, thank you. We could move on to the next slide. So I'm submitting 2 capital projects. The first is a $600,000 project to replace the high school stadium bleachers and press box. This is the bleachers and press box on Holden Field. They were originally built in 1968, so they're an aging structure. They're not ADA compliant for accessibility. The project also involves repairs to a block storage house that's underneath those bleachers. And our next steps after this is to go out and essentially get bid documents and move forward. So next slide. And the second improvement is to different security systems throughout the district. This is an ongoing project. an enhancement for alarm systems and main entrance security. So that's a $250,000 improvement.
All right, I'm going to take it from here and talk for a few minutes about the major project that the town is moving forward tonight, which is the Latimer Lane project that has had so much discussion among these boards over the previous meetings in the last few weeks. We're intentionally keeping it brief tonight because we didn't want to repeat the same slide deck for the same audience here on the call, but I certainly want to let the public know, as Chairman Pomeroy already indicated, that these were a result of a long-term study that we had conducted about our school facilities, led by the Tecton Architects Group and the principal, Jeff Wyszynski, who is on the call here tonight. We've really been at this for the last 2 years. And in addition to helping identify existing conditions with our buildings that needed attention, looked at long-term strategic planning for our buildings. And certainly the theme that emerged from that study was the aging elementary schools that we have in the town of Simsbury. With an average age of 75 years, certainly was the need that emerged from all of that study. The Board of Education took the results of the long-term study and the original capital improvement proposal that moved forward this year, based on a great deal of community engagement that we did last spring, right before the pandemic hit, was to move forward with 2 simultaneous projects. The hope had been to be able to finance both a 6th grade wing at Henry James, which would eliminate some of the crowding that all of our elementary schools are experiencing, but also to address the aging conditions, most notably of Latimer Lane. So that original proposal where Rob talked about tough choices having already been made, the Board of Ed realized that it needed to decouple those projects. We've been using that word over the last few weeks to say we could not move forward with both of those things at the same time. And so that therefore, because of the debt service formula, that we had to identify a top priority. And given the aging condition of Latimer Lane in particular, but also the demographics in town, that Latimer Lane is our most crowded school and the one growing at the most rapid rate, that it needed to move to the top of our priority list. So after a lot of number crunching, what this slide shows our public is that the proposal is for $37 million, and but that after reimbursement that you're talking about, a bonding of a little over $25 million that would be required to move that project forward, that was already shown in sort of the pink blocks that Rob showed earlier. So to just let the public know, what do you get for that amount of money? That's where the next slide comes in. What's included for that kind of price tag. And I want to emphasize the term renovate as new. And that is really, as it sounds, imagining that you really can go floor to ceiling and look at keeping a portion of the building that is as it exists now, but being able to reinvent it in a way that will bring modernization to that building. So renovate as new is a concept that requires, through the state reimbursement grants, that you maintain at least 55% of the current square footage, and then work from there to renovate and add to the rest of the project. And that includes certainly site improvements at the top of this slide, looking at things like not only the playgrounds, but also the, if anybody's been to Latimer Lane, sort of some of the access issues with a very interesting bus and car entrance that creates a lot of confusion and some safety issues, quite frankly, and potentially looking at that in different ways, and also drainage and water systems on the site. The architectural exterior of the building gets completely addressed, most notably at Latimer Lane. Original windows to the building that from an energy efficiency standpoint are sorely in need of improvement, but also many other items that you can see there. Most importantly, the educational spaces, the interior of the building, bringing things up to code, but addressing at Latimer Lane, probably most significantly, the core spaces. By that, we mean things like gymnasiums and cafeterias and media centers that are sorely underperforming at Latimer Lane. Our schools have certainly utilized many more specialized spaces in the last 20 to 30 years. Special education has brought in new demands, more need for office spaces, and things like OTPT and other needs for space in a school. And then trying to figure out how many general classrooms there would be needed based on the demographics. And as I said earlier, Latimer Lane is an expanding school right now and trying to address those issues. And then lastly, a Renovate is New project also addresses important buildings system issues, fire protection that we don't currently have at that school, HVAC systems, and I would include a note that air conditioning throughout would be an important addition to one of our schools. In addition, improved lighting and plumbing systems that certainly bring the school into the modern age. So lastly, what we want to do tonight is one of the things we've done is put together a little video to try to talk to the public about the needs at Latimer Lane School. It's about 5.5 minutes long, and with your indulgence, we'd like to play it for the public hearing tonight.
Hello, I'm Matt Curtis, Superintendent of the Simsbury Public Schools. Over the past several years, our district has been engaged in a long-term study to look at both the infrastructure and long-term enrollment trends in our community. The results of the work is a facilities master plan that has allowed our Board of Education to collaborate with boards of Selectmen and Finance in a joint effort to address some significant capital improvement needs for our school buildings.
Hello, I'm Susan Salina, Chair of the Simsbury Board of Education. It is important to emphasize that our facilities master plan was created in order to give us a long-term strategy for meeting the needs of all of our elementary schools. Over the past year, our Board of Education has determined that the most pressing need is at Latimer Lane School. At 58 years old, it is not only the most crowded of our elementary schools, but also the one most in need of modernization. As we prepare for a referendum on a building project to address the needs of the first of our 5 elementary schools, we would like to share with you some of the issues firsthand.
Welcome to Latimer Lane Elementary School, a proud school of character and distinction located in the heart of Weetawk. My name is Michael Luzetti and I'm the building principal. Latimer is home to a diverse and expanding population that has grown from 371 to 444 students in the span of just 4 years, with a growth rate projected to continue that trend. Latimer is also an aging building, remaining largely untouched over the past 58 years. I'd like to share with you some of the many needs here at Latimer. As you enter the lobby of Latimer Lane, you enter one of the few remaining schools without a secure vestibule entrance. One of the primary benefits of a new or renovated building is enhanced safety and security. As currently constructed, there is no easy way to address the main entrance situation that exists at Latimer Lane in order to funnel traffic through the main office of the building. To the contrary, once a visitor has entered the building, they have access to the entire school. The layout of the main office itself creates challenges. The nurse's office is housed in the back of the office suite with no direct access. Instead, a sick child must enter through the secretarial area, pass between the office conference room and the principal's office in order to access the nurse's room. Each of these spaces are undersized to meet the needs of a school projected to exceed 500 students. Continuing with the theme of undersized core spaces, the Latimer Lane Media Center is the smallest in town despite being the second largest elementary school. It was created several years ago by combining 2 classrooms. As a result, Latimer Lane has access to 2,000 less books than the other buildings in town. Additionally, this space is used for STEM instruction, teacher meetings, and professional development. The gymnasium at Latimer Lane is once again undersized to meet the needs of its currently 440 students plus staff. With a total capacity of 280 bodies, the school is unable to come together currently for celebrations and assemblies. With extremely low ceilings and antiquated lighting, the space is not well suited for the high-quality physical education instruction that our teachers continue to provide. Additionally, there is no interior storage. All materials are located in a garage outside of the building. Each year on Veterans Day, our school invites the veterans in our community to celebrate with us as we honor them. Programs like this are in jeopardy unless these core spaces can be addressed. The undersized kitchen and cafeteria at Latimer Lane is not large enough to seat 2 grade levels at a time. As a result, lunch waves run from 10:30 in the morning until almost 2 o'clock each day. Due to the location of the gymnasium and the cafeteria in the center of the building, there is not an easy expansion to address the needs of either of these 2 core spaces. An additional concern at Latimer Lane is building accessibility. There is currently a staircase that divides the lower section of the building, housing the library, cafeteria, art room, gymnasium, office, nurse's office, and primary grade classrooms, from the music rooms and students in grades 3 through 6. Once again, due to the layout of the building, we are unable to address this concern with the addition of a ramp. The end result is that the upper hallway is only accessible by exiting the building and re-entering through a side entrance to the building. Latimer Lane, after 58 years, has found itself to be a building in need of updates and repairs simply to maintain. With crowded classrooms, crowded shared office spaces, and a repurposed stage, combined with a lack of storage, have all been the end result of a building working to function beyond its capacity. As you've seen, the needs at Latimer Lane are many, and we have the opportunity to address those needs. It's elementary, time to meet the need.
Rob, I will, before I turn it over to Eric for the Board of Selectmen presentation, I will point out to the public that if they want to go to our website and watch that video without the strobe effect that came with it tonight, it really does run smoothly on our website. I'm not sure what happened tonight. Thanks for listening to our presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I know people on this call know me, but if you're in the community, my name is Eric Wellman. I'm first selectman, and I'm going to present our town's operating budget, and then I'll turn it over to Sean Askham, who will cover the capital budget. I don't know how I'm going to possibly top the video. I thought, Neil, that the effect was for dramatic purposes, but it's good to know that it wasn't. Okay, why don't you go to the next slide, Melissa? I thought it would be helpful to start with this really high-level overview. This is, what would happen, the impact on our taxes if the budget were to pass, as is tonight. It would be an increase of under 1%, and that amounts to about $6 to $7 a month for the median value home, or about $80. I'm not sharing anything tonight that hasn't already been, exhaustively presented in public session, so I'm going to be brief. But I also think it's important, to emphasize that the Board of Selectmen, and I know the Board of Ed too, worked very hard to, in recognition of the very difficult year that it's been for our community, for many of our taxpayers and our businesses, to do what we can to hold the line on taxes, but also continue to provide vital services for our children, services like police and plowing, and maintaining all of the infrastructure that we've come to expect at a high level in our community. You can go to the next slide, Melissa. So when we talk about our town's operating budget, it's a little over $25 million. So in the context of all of the taxes we pay locally, it's about a quarter of our taxes. Our operating budget would be an increase of a little over 4%. Again, going back to the previous slide, it's important to emphasize that that's a tax increase of 4%. Much of that is mitigated by the fact that we have had some impressive grand list growth in our tax base that allows us to mitigate the impact to the taxpayer. So highlighting some of the changes that have been made to this budget. So to begin with, the Board of Selectmen's operating budget was presented by the town manager back in February. It was changed and it was adopted unanimously by the Board of Selectmen. And then it was changed again, I would say tweaked, by the Board of Finance. So that's the budget that we're looking at tonight. What was removed from our original budget that the Board of Selectmen passed was $22,000 for the Spirit Council to conduct data collection. The intent is to pay for that out of current year-end savings. So that's a project that we are still committed to. Increasing the amount that we're contributing to fund the retirements of our workforce. We know through our actuaries that public employees live longer than they used to, which means we need to put more toward retirement than we have in the past. So these increases reflect that reality. You can go to the next slide. When we look at the budget drivers, debt service is a significant driver, as is contractual salary increases. And I'll point out that about $40,000 of that increase comes from the fact that there has been an increase in the minimum wage, which particularly impacts our Parks and Rec budget because they hire a lot of seasonal staff. And as I mentioned before, increases to pension and OPEB, which ensure that we're meeting the promises that we made to our employees around fully funding their retirement in a responsible way. You can go to the next slide. The budget that the Board of Selectmen adopted contains some changes that I wanted to highlight. The first is a temporary assessor position. So this is a position that essentially is spending money to bring in additional revenue. So this position would cost about $55,000 a year and is estimated to bring in above $500,000 a year by completing additional field inspections. We have included in our budget a parks facility maintenance technician position. The parks infrastructure in our town has increased significantly in the last 20 years, while the number of people charged with keeping our parks looking good has actually decreased. So this is really a service restoration rather than a service improvement. Also, parks professional development, ensuring that our park staff have the certifications required to be laying pesticides and other responsibilities of their job. About $8,600 for de-escalation training for our police department. You can flip to the next slide. Oh, I think you might, oh, there we go. Also a modest increase in funding for library materials and also a modest increase for the Meals on Wheels program, which would be funded by the Darling Trust. And I'll turn it over next to Deputy First Selectman Sean Askham.
Thanks, Eric, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Rob, and the Board of Finance for allowing us the opportunity to present tonight. Just quick lesson in process. I know all of my friends on the phone know this, but for the folks at home, these capital projects originate at either the town, the Board of Selectmen level, or the Board of Education level. But then they come through this budget process where the Board of Selectmen actually reviews all of the capital projects and then endorses or not, and sends them on to the Board of Finance. So whereas we talk about individual town or Board of Education budgets, when we talk about capital projects, we're talking about the town in its entirety, both the service side and the education side. So why do I say that? Because I think it's really important. Not only did the Board of Education do a deep analysis, but members of the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen also took tours, much like you all just saw in that video of the building. And I think the need is self-made. It's overwhelming at the Latimer Lane School in terms of the need for investment down there. So the Board of Selectmen did endorse that project and did send it on here to the Board of Finance in this public hearing to review. What's exciting about this year is we have two signature projects, I would say, that Latimer Lane renovation project and expansion. And again, that's the town side, that 25 million. 26 million rounded, but then also your attention up on the Meadowwood acquisition. To me, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for us as a community to acquire a piece of land that I would argue is a signature piece of land up in our northern parcel. This is a land that for many of us that have been around, remember was much debated in terms of the use, went through a substantial land use and then a court process. It has now come full circle for the town to have the opportunity to acquire it. The Trust for Public Land is actually the contract holder with the owner of the parcel to acquire the land. And I say that because it's important. The town cost here is that 25 million and change that you see. The actual purchase price is the 6 million that's been going around. But what's really important to understand, and we'll get into the grants and other ways that the municipal projects are paid for in a minute, is that that's not the cost to the taxpayer of Simsbury. The Trust for Public Land, in partnership with town management, has done an outstanding job of looking and starting to acquire necessary grants. Why do I mention this? This is, again, for folks that have been around, would recall that Ethel Walker was much in the same way. What's exciting here is that I think we've presented an even better deal to the taxpayer than Ethel Walker. And Maria will hold me true here, but I believe the math was roughly 27,000 an acre was the town cost for that Ethel Walker parcel, and I believe it was for the development rights. Whereas this is closer to 20,000 per acre when you get down to it from a town side, and it's for the actual land, not just the development rights. So I think a pretty unique and substantial opportunity for us as a community to preserve I think a pretty unique and historic parcel. So those are the two signature projects. We've got a lot of the other, I would call maintenance, important year-to-year projects that we do. The Simsbury Meadows parking and accessibility is really critical for anybody that's parked down there, knows that the folks and the staff do a great job. But the white lines that are painted in the handicapped parking is actually in that dirt and rock parking lot. Simply not a good space, not a good surface for folks with mobility challenges. So part of this would be paid for through bonds, and then there's also a grant opportunity. We've got the annual highway pavement management. Tom Roy and his team do an outstanding job of maintaining our roads. We've had a long-standing commitment to a quality of roads in town, which I think folks appreciate. So this is our standard contribution there. And under recent years, we've embarked on a sidewalk construction initiative to make sure that we're improving our sidewalks throughout the community. You saw previously from Jason on the district security improvements and the high school bleachers. So we've already gone through those. What's important is, again, as I said, there's many ways to pay for these municipal projects. The first set was bonds, as we talked about. There's also operating transfers. So some of our pavement management actually comes out of an operating transfer that you see here. And then grants are a critical way that we receive funding. So again, highway pavement management comes out of a fund called LOSIP, and Town Aid Road, for folks that would love a lesson on that. Lisa or Tom Roy would be more than happy to sit down and talk to you. I know Lisa's gone and done some extensive research there, and I see her smiling there. But they'd be happy to give you a lesson there on LOSIP. There's also some north end sidewalk construction. Again, I believe this is connecting in front of the Big Y down to the Andes parcel, and that's through the LOTSIP grant. We talked about the parking lot earlier when we were lucky enough to receive a STEEP grant from the state. As Neil articulated, they did a really thoughtful job in terms of how to bring forward this Latimer project to maximize state reimbursement, and that's why you're seeing the Renovate to New, which maximizes our potential grant money from the state at nearly just over $11 million. And then Tony and Mr. Roy need to make sure that our sewage treatment plant facility is safe from a flood event. So as our flood maps evolve, as those are redrawn, we are going to need to bring the berms up. The good news is that there is some grant money that will help there, and then the rest, I believe, will be paid for through the sewer fund, which I believe is on the next slide, Melissa, right? Yep, there it is. So you'll see the remaining amount for that berm improvement, which is bringing that berm up a couple of feet, and then also sewer lining come out of the sewer use fund. This is to continue to maintain our sewer system in town. And then there's also an upgrade in the Woodland Hot Meadow Street area, which you'll see comes through the sewer assessment fund. And Eric, those are my slides.
Great, thanks very much, Sean. And I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Better off mute. All right. Our next order of business then would be to have comment from the public on these budgets. And as I said at the top of the show, we're going to start with those that requested to speak live on this presentation. Just a little bit of background. We are using the protocols that were approved under Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B relative to public meetings. And so we would, when we get to reading through the list of people who have submitted, you'll see what I mean. But I would ask the presenters to please state your name and your address. We strongly prefer that the speakers be taxpayers or voters in the town. And then try to limit your comments with respect to time based on the dozen or more that we have presenting and the long list of submitters. So I would appreciate that. I'm going to just call you to speak based on the order in which I guess we received these. So the first up would be Joe Campolietta. And if I pronounce your name, I apologize.
Thank you, Rob. That was actually pretty close. So I appreciate it. So good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Campolietta, and I live at 3 Browngate Lane here in Simsbury. First, I want to thank the Board of Finance, the Board of Ed, and Board of Selectmen for your hard work, the amount of time and effort you put into putting this very complex and complicated budget together. I understand, I've done school budgets. I understand the complexity and the tough decisions you have to make. So thank you to you all for your hard work and just the amazing amount of time you put in on it. I do appreciate it. I'm speaking tonight to express my strong support for the purchase of the Meadowwood parcel. Some of the points that I was going to make, Sean has already made, and I appreciate the clarification certainly about the cost to the town being $2.5 million as opposed to the total of $6 million due to the significant funding that we will receive from the Trust for Public Land. They do a great job, and that's also appreciated. And it's important to understand that while the numbers make this a very smart purchase, there are really many more reasons this parcel should be purchased than just its cost effectiveness. I can give a very brief history on this. 20 years ago, the town was approached by Griffin Land, which is the real estate subsidiary of Culbro Tobacco, to put a high density development in on 2 parcels of land, about 620 homes on 300 acres of land. And a citizens action group formed. We were an environmental advocacy group called the North Simsbury Coalition. I was on the board of directors for it. And we realized that this overdevelopment was going to be very harmful to Simsbury because of the very negative environmental impact that this high density development would have. So we did a lot of research on it. We had an environmental scientist on our board. We spoke with commercial and university-based land use experts and came up with a number of findings that honestly, what was true 20 years ago is still true today. So I'd like to just highlight some of those so that we understand why purchasing this property is so very important. First of all, this land, which at the time included the Barn Door Hills section, which of course in the out-of-court settlement brings us to where we are now, is a major portion of the largest aquifer recharge area in Simsbury. And parts of that area where the aquifer is actually considered shallow or not very deep. There are several vernal pools on this property. For those of you who don't know, a vernal pool is a temporary pool that typically fills with water and remains ponded through the spring and early summer, and then dries completely in the middle of summer each year. These are critical to the ecosystem, and they provide a habitat for numerous native plants, amphibians, and other animals. These species spend the dry season as seeds and eggs, and they grow and reproduce again when the ponds fill with water. And these ponds are typically used by birds such as egrets, ducks, and hawks as a seasonal source of food and water. Many species of bird, pollinating, insect, and other animals utilize this parcel as a major migratory pathway between Great Pond and the McLean Game Refuge. And also the property itself has a very big historical significance. And because one of the things that would be planned to be put on that property is an interactive presentation about Martin Luther King's time in Simsbury. In the 1940s, Martin Luther King, along with other students from Morehouse College, worked probably that exact land and some other land in Simsbury worked tobacco. Martin Luther King said that the liberating experience of getting out from under the Jim Crow laws of the time had a tremendous influence on him. He wrote to his mother, and I quote, "It was a bitter feeling going back to segregation." So this experience, the 2 summers he spent in Simsbury, was very important. If we don't purchase the land, I mean, what do we think is going to happen? Personally, I think Culbro will sell either wholes or parts of it to the highest bidder. So they'll probably be a developer, and they're going to build. That's what they do. And if they do build, it'll probably be a high density type development, which will cause substantial damage to the area. Again, what was true 20 years ago is still true today. So some of the things that could happen if this land is not kept open could have a deleterious effect on our wells with a potential impact on the quality of our drinking water. And it's not just private wells like I have on my property, but you have to understand that the town's water also comes from the aquifer. The development would pave over the area, which reduces the permeability of the soil, which would impact the major aquifer recharge area, less rain going into the ground, less water in the aquifer. If they build residential homes or high density development, they tend to utilize high concentrations of pesticides, fertilizers, and harmful sprays. The damaging runoff will leach into the aquifer. And in fact, this type of damage has happened in Simsbury with some wells already contaminated with EDB and other pesticides. And of course, it would destroy the natural migratory pathway between Great Pond and the McLean Game Refuge, which would disrupt the life cycle of countless birds and animals. Obviously, the vernal pools would all be filled and would kill off quite a few species of native plants and other animals who rely on them for their life cycle. And of course, the elimination of open space would kill off pollinating insects, which are already in rapid and extreme decline.
Joe,
Rapid decline has been tied to decline in bird populations. So it really would have quite an effect all the way up and down the food chain. And obviously, we would literally pave over a connection to our past. So I strongly urge the Board of Finance to keep the Meadowwood purchase under capital projects for the fiscal years following, because we have an opportunity to purchase an environmentally sensitive parcel of land that is available at a cost-effective per acre with the attributes that cannot be replicated elsewhere. We would protect our vital aquifer on which we depend not only for private wells, but town drinking water as well. We would maintain a vital migratory corridor for birds and other animals between Great Pond and the McLean Game Refuge, which is important to their life cycle. Protects a sensitive ecosystem by protecting the several vernal pools on the parcel, and with proper management as farm and meadowland, it will help increase bird and pollinating insect populations, which benefits us all. And of course, the residents of Simsbury can enjoy the beauty of the land with walking trails, and it provides an important connection to our history with an interactive presentation about the legacy of Martin Luther King and the students from Morehouse College who worked these tobacco fields in the 40s. Finally, I just want to say I've been a resident for almost 30 years, and I'm married to someone who was born and raised in Simsbury. And what has always impressed me about this town is how seriously we take our stewardship of our land. And this is just a way for us to continue that legacy. I appreciate the time to speak, and thank you very much for listening.
all right, thank you. Again, we got 12 people, so we can't go 7-8 minutes on each. So I really appreciate, to the extent that Joe's given a great lead in here, let's try not to be too repetitive if we can. So next up would be Joe Tracy.
Hi, this is Joe Tracy. I live at 40 Berkshire Way. My wife and I have lived in town for almost 47 years. First, I would like to thank you and your time and commitment to the town of Simsbury. I'd also like to thank the Board of Finance, the Board of Education, and the Board of Selectmen for the hard work that they have put in that resulted in an outstanding bond rating that allows us to have incredibly low interest rates for our bonding projects. I'm concerned about the Meadowwood project, which has a long history, as Joe has pointed out, in terms of development. I've watched our town change throughout the years, and for most part, there have been well-planned changes. But there's been an extraordinary amount of change in a much shorter period of time over the last 2 years. The most impressive is the unending development of large-scale apartment complexes, as well as the commercial-sized solar farm, which destroyed hundreds of acres of prime farmland and the destruction of over 35 acres of trees, forest land. Though the solar project was opposed by the majority of the Simsbury boards, as well as the Connecticut DEP and the Department of Agriculture, the Connecticut Siting Council pushed this project through. My fear is that the Meadowwood area will be sold for additional solar farm development, since it is very close to the existing solar farm and the power substation, or for additional large-scale apartment complexes. This is one of the last large open space tracts in Simsbury. Simsbury is quickly losing open space and seemingly losing its ability to plan intelligently for growth. The 288 acres will preserve 177 acres of prime farmland, has cultural significance due to Martin Luther King, and will provide hiking, birding, and sports opportunities for the town. $2.5 million seems like a small price for Simsbury to purchase a chance to be a participant in its own land use plan. I support the Board of Selectmen in their quest to work with the Trust for Public Land to secure the property for future use that is determined by the town itself, rather than outside entities who rarely have our best interest in mind. This project should be a part of the budget referendum this year. I also fully support the Latimer Lane project that was previously outlined by the Board of Ed. It's that time, their time has come to improve that school. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Joe. Melissa, while we're between speakers here, could you put up the link on the screen for the comments where they're posted? Somehow figure out a way to help people find them. Again, it's on the Board of Finance. There you go. So you go to the Town of Simsbury Board of Finance, the agenda page, and then right there, the public hearing comments are listed. They're second. All right. Okay, great. Let's move on. Next speaker is Barbara Friedland.
Hi, I'm Barbara Friedland. I'm president of the Simsbury Grange. That's at 236 Farms Village Road in Simsbury. I'm speaking on behalf of the Grange members about the importance of preserving the Meadowwood property. So I know some of these things have been said before, but I just want to focus a little bit on Martin Luther King's time in Simsbury. Since 1931, the motto of the Grange has been, "Our cause is our community." The Simsbury Grange is proud to share in and protect Dr. King's legacy. Martin Luther King Jr., along with other Morehouse College students, worked and lived on the Meadowwood property and also attended social events in the town of Simsbury, including probably dances at the Simsbury Grange, which we just recently found out about a year ago, which is really exciting for our members. And the Connecticut Historical Society has actually, they actually have a grant now to look into more about the history of Martin Luther King's time in Connecticut. And we hope to be participating in that process. We support the Martin Luther King Memorial at the Free Library. We want to support Meadowwood as well. We believe it's important to protect the Meadowwood property for future generations to walk on and perhaps work the same land as Martin Luther King Jr. The Trust for Public Land is helping Simsbury with more than half of the purchase price through grants and private donations. Protecting this land would be beneficial in welcoming all community members, including the Black community, to a unique, natural, and historical outdoor setting. Meadowwood should remain on the referendum where the citizens of Simsbury have the opportunity to vote on this important issue. Thank you for your time and consideration and also all the hard work that you do for the town of Simsbury. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next up is Stephen McDonnell. Stephen there? All right, let's move on. Sarah Faulkner.
Evening. I have to turn off my own sound. Is that working better?
That's better.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. I have a helper to address you. I'm the president of Hartford Audubon Society. We are a small nonprofit. We're in Hartford County, although we have birders from all over the state. My cat only does this when the important moment comes. Apologies. I won't repeat what you've heard so far. Joe made a very good summary of the Meadowwood property. That's what I'd like to urge your support for. This is a really special opportunity you have in Simsbury. I do a fair amount of birding there myself. Many of our members are residents of Simsbury. This is a big property. 288 acres does not come along very often. And for it to be contiguous with McLean and with the Great Pond section of Massaco State Forest makes it especially special. The price tag also to the town is not very much. When the Trust for Public Land gets involved, they do a wonderful job amassing grants and putting the money together so that the ultimate cost to the community is low. For you to be able to purchase 288 acres, of open space for just barely over $2 million is a bargain. And it's very special land. This land has forest, it has working farmland, it has a historic aspect for the civil rights era, and it has wetlands. we being members of Hartford Audubon, have found a number of rare and endangered species on the property over the years. And we'd like to see those continue. We're able to educate the public and enjoy that property for decades to come. I can't say enough about what an important purchase this is. TPL would not be involved if they didn't think so. I've worked in land preservation for several decades, and Trust or Public Land only comes in when they see a tremendous value to the public and a good environmental aspect to the property. So you should be very honored that they're here doing this with you and for you. So I'd like to urge your purchase of that property. I guess the way I want to leave this, there are two additional thoughts. One is build more buildings, but you can't build more land. Land only comes along once. And once you bypass this, if you choose not to purchase it, it will become housing. Or it could become, as was said earlier, another big solar farm. But in any event, it will no longer be open. It will no longer be there for the public. It will be no longer there for water recharge and for migration of species and for the mental health of your residents and residents of other organizations and other towns. And I am on the Board of Finance for the town of Canton, which is where I live. And I can tell you, and I'm sure you know this, that if you purchase this property and it does to housing, it will be a financial cost to the town. Housing almost never brings in more money than the residents do when you have residential development. So if you're ready to take almost 300 new housing units with all the children that come with them and pay for all the additional services that those people bring, that's a decision you would make. I think financially and economically and environmentally and for recreational reasons and for all the things, you really ought to invest your money in this property now. It's a very special opportunity, and I'd like to urge you to put the money forward and do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is David Bush. Is David on?
He's muted.
Thank you. Sorry. It's been a while since I've been hanging around here. So first of all, thank you, Board of Finance. As you obviously might guess, my name is David Bush, 4 Catherine Lane, Chairman of Park and Rec. And as you can see behind me, I'm all about recreation. I'm all about outdoors. Did you know that this week is the Masters Week? And you have Jim Nance. And Jim Nance starts every broadcast with, "Hello, friends." And I think that's important because we have competing interests in this budget. And we all got to remember we're all residents of the town of Simsbury and we're all friends. I'm here simply to advocate for certain aspects of Park and Rec as well as open space. As you know, we have in the budget a request for a new facility and parks maintainer. This is not a new position. This is trying to restore 3 positions that we lost. That must be kept. As you know, we've added a great deal of land and responsibilities to the Park and Rec staff. We are so thin that you're going to see this fine land go down in quality and quantity when people use it, especially here during the pandemic. I'd also like to advocate that the improvements at Simsbury Meadows, they aren't only... That must be kept. As you know, we've added a great deal of land and responsibility here. Park and Rec staff, we are so thin that you're going to see this fine land go down in quality and quantity when people use it. God, I love technology. This is the best part of being on a Zoom call. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, David. If you're not speaking, please mute your line.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay. So I apologize. So I'll just continue on, which is really the Simsbury Meadow property really does need, and these things have been identified. The town paid money for the master plan. You don't just spend money on a master plan and ignore the recommendations. So the master plan said we need another technician. We need the Meadows property improvements for paving and access, and we need the golf club renovation. It's a 20-year-old building. If you don't maintain them, you've already heard enough about Meadowwood. I would be remiss. I was on the Open Space Committee, recently got off. But here's the key point for the Board of Finance. Do not take away Park and Rec dollars for the purchase of a capital fund project that has nothing to do with Park and Rec. We already saw our irrigation project at the golf course get delayed another year, and we understand why. We get it, we support it. But at the same token, these are different priorities, and we need to keep an eye on the fact that this is no different than buying Ethel Walker or the Triangle property. Other than that, I do appreciate all the time you spent, and folks, God bless you for putting this much time on a call.
Thank you. Next up is Susan Messino.
Hi, good evening. Susan Messino, I'm a voter and a taxpayer, and I'll make my comments short. I sent in written comments, which I hope will be.
Excuse me, Susan, I'm sorry, can you state your address for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 41 Madison Lane, West Simsbury.
Thank you.
I sent in written comments, which I hope will be read. And I wrote them from a perspective of someone who's on the Open Space Commission. I'm an educator, and I'm also the co-chair of the Science and Technology Working Group of the Governor's Council on Climate Change. And I wrote my comments from both a scientific and an economic perspective. It included some charts in them and kind of comprehensive reasons why this makes scientific, economic, and educational sense for a sense of place for why we should proceed with a vote to Meadowwood on referendum. So I'm going to be just very specific in my comments right now and focus on things that I know are true. And I think that Sean Askham misspoke on what he mentioned in terms of the cost per acre on Meadowwood. I believe it's less than $10,000 per acre. And he said that Ethel Walker was $27,000 per acre. So I just wanted to clarify that about the cost, that it won't be more than $2.51 million. And the cost per acre is very, very low compared to any of our other recent open space purchases. If we don't buy it, as other people have said, and I included some charts in my comments, it will make the current drivers of our taxes worse. So that's a matter of multiple studies, and there's some specific data for Connecticut in my written comments. The truth is that if we don't go forward with this, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with this land in the future. But what's currently proposed is kind of standard suburban sprawl, which is the last thing that we need for the planet or for our community right now. What we focused on in the Science and Technology Working Group are critical things that we need to think of moving forward. And protecting our land is number one, because that's how you protect clean water. It's how you protect your lifeline for the future, is control of local resources and local land. And this land has all of the different, farmland, prime farmland. Simsbury is in the top tier of farmland in a state with the top farmland in the country. It also has habitat. So there's a lot of different values that all coalesce on this one piece of land as really a one-time opportunity. I know there's been a lot of discussion about affordable housing, but the truth is that the affordable housing as proposed on this property at $280,000 is not affordable for the people who actually need affordable housing. And I think this is a serious discussion that we need to have and find common sense solutions to that actually address the constituencies that need affordable housing. So ultimately, I just want to really emphasize how important it is to allow the public to vote on this, consider the exact information on these various issues. And as others, really thank you for the time that you've spent on this. My final comment is that as an educator, and I mentioned this at the Board of Selectmen, when kids know where they're from and have a sense of belonging and a sense of place, that bodes well for their future success. This is, well known among educators, social scientists, et cetera. And I think if we want to have a diverse and equitable community, public land is one of the greatest providers of equity. And keeping this shared history that we can be proud of in Simsbury is one of the most powerful ways that we can welcome a diversity of constituents into our town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Marjorie Winters.
All right, thank you very much for having me here tonight. Marjorie Winters, 111 Old Farms Road in West Simsbury. I currently serve as the Conservation Inland Wetlands Chair. I'm on the Open Space Committee, and I'm also currently the president of the Simsbury Land Trust. So I think you know that I'm going to be talking about Meadowwood and its support. As a matter of fact, my very first meeting as on the Conservation Committee was for Meadowwood back in 2000. That was my first introduction to the Conservation Committee. And at the time, we were facing a large development there. And on the Conservation Commission, quite often, we have to sort of mitigate the impacts of development. We recognized the value of the land back then, but that was not the project that was before us. I'm so excited that this is the project before us now to acquire this land because we recognized the value of it then. So much of what has been said about Meadowwood has been said before, but I just want to point out what the town's values are. We have a plan of conservation to development. There's a statement that says what we want to protect. And I just want to point out that each of those things that we want to protect are things that are inherent in this Meadowwood project. The first one is protect natural resources and water quality. As you heard from Joe Campolito, this is an aquifer. This will protect the water quality. We want to preserve open space. But it's not just any open space. It's open space that's connected to other open space. That makes this property even more valuable than having an isolated piece of property. And it's being adjacent to the Messino forest and the Great Pond increases the value of this property tremendously. We also want to maintain and enhance the community character and protect historical resources. This property will do it. This is iconic land, and we have an interesting history with it. We want to preserve farmland. We are not making more farmland. A lot of the Simsbury Land Trust and the town have done a good job of preserving some of the farmland we have in Hall and Tull Meadow and Rosedale and various other pieces of property. But this will allow us to protect another 117 acres of farmland. It's much easier to protect farmland than try to recreate farmland out of forest. That won't happen. And then promote sustainability and resilience. That's the last point of the POCD. Growing food locally is a sustainable and resilient process. So there's so many other reasons that have been gone over with this. I want to thank the board, the various boards that have put their time and effort into this project. And I just want to show that the support of the Land Trust, members of our board, by and large, has supported this. The Conservation Commission has supported the purchase of this land, and I hope that this goes to referendum. So I want to thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Next up is Donna Summers.
Hi, good evening. My name is Donna Summers. I live on Pondside Lane in West Simsbury. I've lived in Simsbury most of my life. This purchase, I strongly support the Meadowwood purchase. This purchase will continue our town's legacy of protecting wetlands and open space. I'm often told by people when I tell them I live in Simsbury that Simsbury's natural areas and its resulting character are what draws people to this town, both for recreation and to live. I also want to emphasize the ecological and environmental importance of this piece of property. I'm also a member of Hartford Audubon, an avid birder. I've birded there. I had the privilege of seeing the pink-footed geese, which you may hear about later in detail from one of my colleagues, which is a very rare species that happened to be on this parcel back in November. One of the reasons that bird and pollinator and other species are declining is due to development that removes habitat that they need for successful breeding and for the rest areas they need during migration. This parcel is unique in that it interconnects several wildlife habitats. In doing so, it provides a critical corridor and continuous woodlands that bird species and other species need to survive and thrive. This parcel is critically important in connecting those existing spaces that people have talked about in other presentations. I also wanted to emphasize that with well-managed grasslands such as this, are instrumental in providing habitats for grassland species that are being disturbed by development. A personal experience is that we used to have whippoorwills up in that area, just to the west of this, the large piece of property. And those species I used to hear them there as a child and have listened for them in recent years when I'm birding, and I'm not hearing them anymore. And so preserving this piece of property will help to leave grasslands available for species such as whippoorwills, the eastern meadowlark, grasshopper sparrows, and other things of that nature. I also want to, I believe that Doug Beach is on the line and will be speaking later, but I just want to state that as a longtime Simsbury resident, I would urge these boards to approve the purchase of this land and keeping it in this budget for our consideration. I urge a yes vote. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to preserve these habitats and the cultural aspects and historical aspects of Meadowwood as well. So thank you very much for your time. And again, I appreciate all your presentations tonight. It was very illuminating. Thank you again.
All right, thank you very much. Next up is Helen Peterson.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Helen Peterson, and I live at 20 Longview Drive. I've been in Simsbury 60 years. That's most of my life. I've been following your deliberations of the budget, and I have to say that you have navigated it very well. And I appreciate all of the efforts of all of the agencies as well as the town staff. Now, I would like to address the issue of Meadowwood, but slightly differently. I usually concentrate on the environmental values, but that has been so eloquently spoken to this evening. I would like to move to another issue. You've also been overwhelmingly encouraged because the combined support of the recommendations from the Board of Selectmen, the Land Use Commissions, the Parks and Rec Commission, and the Open Space Committee in which I serve. I hope I am correctly quoting Sean Ascom, our selectman. It is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Now, specifically, considering the struggle to absorb the high cost of the Latimer Lane project into this year's budget, and I taught first grade at Latimer Lane when it first opened 58 years ago. Also, you have to consider the unknown and yet to be determined impact of the numbers of school-age children from all of the apartments, condos proliferating in town these recent years. But I was reminded of a study conducted by Trust for Public Land and another thoughtful agency in the 90s, and it was called Cows Don't Go to School. We learned an awful lot up from that, and it was proven over the years. I'm trying to go through my notes quickly. Some things don't change. Agricultural products don't go to school, trees don't go to school, and cows still don't go to school. So I am moving along. If you will be patient with me, I'm trying to cut to the chase here. Thank you for the opportunity to make this last comment. I have heard of your concerns that there has been no fundraising effort on the part of our citizens as there has been on the part of the TPO. We are participating as citizens. We are paying taxes, and this is quite the bargain. As Susan said, it is the least expensive piece of property that we have been able to acquire in all our history. You have the numbers. But most importantly and finally, you have something else. You have the Open Space Fund. It was the ordinance in our charter that was established 20 years ago, but you haven't funded it or activated it over the years. This is your chance. No better time. Activate it, offer the opportunity to the people, not only to go to the referendum and vote for this, but offer it to the people to be able to make contributions if they so choose and if they are able to. We could still campaign for funds even after we approve this project and encourage it through the referendum, that this is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Thank you, and it's good to see everyone after all this long year. I wish you well, and thank you for the opportunity of speaking.
Thank you. Next up is Doug Beach.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Douglas Beach. My address is 138 Terry's Plain Road in Simsbury, and I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I'm a Simsbury native, a member of Simsbury Land Trust, and a member and former board member of Hartford Audubon Society. Having left town for approximately 30 years to complete my education and to pursue my career, I returned home in 2005 and have been keeping track of local birding activity ever since. To date, I have observed 208 species of birds in Simsbury. I'm writing to you in regard to the Meadowwood property, which I hope will be purchased and maintained as open space. Towns rarely have the chance to protect such large and important landscapes. It would be unfortunate if we passed on this opportunity to preserve land, which not only has historical significance, but also has supported some very unusual avian species. On November 24th, 2020, I discovered a pair of pink-footed geese at Great Pond State Forest. For the next 3 weeks, they, along with over 1,000 Canada geese, grazed in the field on the Hoskins Road section of Meadowwood. Pink-footed goose is an exceptionally rare species in North America. It typically nests in Greenland and Iceland and spends its winters in Great Britain and northwestern Europe. To my knowledge, there were only 2 or 3 other pink-footed geese being reported in all of North America during the time our birds were in Simsbury. Our geese were included on the American Birding Association's National Rare Bird Hotline, and I was asked by the Connecticut Ornithological Association to provide written and photographic documentation. Pending a vote by COA's Rare Bird Committee, the pink-footed geese will be entered into Connecticut's permanent ornithological record. At the same time, 2 greater white-fronted geese frequented the Hoskins Road field. Although not as rare as pink-footed goose, greater white-fronted is uncommon in Connecticut and is certainly a significant find. Additionally, a cackling goose was reported, although I did not happen to see it. On May 5, 2019, I witnessed a Bonaparte's gull sitting in a temporary pool of water which forms in the northwest corner of the Hoskins Road field after significant rain events. If the timing is right, this temporary pond is also a magnet for migrating shorebirds, including greater yellowlegs, lesser yellowlegs, least sandpipers, and semi-palmated plovers, among others, all of which were observed as recently as last year. Now, one could certainly argue that the presence of the pink-footed geese and the Bonaparte's gulls were anomalies and not to be expected in the future. I would counter by saying that the presence of all of the above-mentioned birds, plus others, including horned larks and northern harrier, signifies that this property has characteristics which attract uncommon and even rare birds. For example, the Hoskins Road field and nearby Great Pond create an ideal environment whereby the geese can alternately roost and forage throughout the day. Now, the Hoskins Road field is currently being used for agriculture with a cover crop planted each fall. However, what is significant is that up until 2016, the land was maintained as a weedy field. On June 5, 2013, I and others observed a grasshopper sparrow in the vicinity of the 3 tobacco barns. Grasshopper sparrow is classified as an endangered species in the state of Connecticut, primarily due to habitat loss. As recently as May 3, 2016, I observed another grasshopper sparrow displaying behind the same tobacco barns. Longtime Simsbury birder.
Mr. Beach?
Yes.
Can you come to a conclusion, please?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
I have written documentation. Once more, these are endangered birds. My hope is that Meadowwood property will be purchased and maintained as open space. Also, that the site plan can be adjusted to accommodate what I believe is a significant birding location. Depending on how the land is managed, perhaps grasshopper sparrows or other prairie-loving species will return. And given the amount of grassland habitat that has already been lost in our state, this would be a truly significant occurrence. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. We have one other, actually two other. I would ask Chelsea Armistead. Are you on the line? All right, that was unclear. And then Lori Fernand.
Hello. Good evening, Chair Pomeroy and members of the Simsbury Board of Finance. My name is Lori Fernand, and I and my family have lived for the last 15 years with a trailhead at the bottom of our driveway at 15 Camille Lane in West Simsbury. The primary factor in our choosing to move to Simsbury was its amazing natural spaces. Having grown up playing in the woods in Western Connecticut and then living in the Santa Monica Mountains outside the city of Los Angeles, the top criteria for choosing a place to reside was access to the woods. I benefited from the vision of the town, the Simsbury Land Trust, and the Trust for Public Land. As the trailhead at the bottom of my driveway leads into the 73-acre Tull Meadow Woods with access to Ethel Walker Woods over 400 acres and then Stratton Brook Forest State Park. These protected lands underscore the importance of the natural environment for the vast majority of Simsbury residents. We are here because of the preserved open spaces that define our human habitat in this town. Since we moved here in 2005, there has been a great deal of development in our town, with 9% growth in population over just the last decade. And I believe Simsbury is the only small town in Connecticut to have had a recent increase in its public school population. In order to maintain the natural world that is so valued by the residents here, we need to have a corresponding prioritization of preservation to balance this significant growth. The Meadowwoods project helps us achieve that goal, as evidenced in the support of this effort, this effort has received from the Historical Commission, Conservation Commission, Open Space Commission, Culture, Parks and Recreation Commission, Planning Commission, and Board of Selectmen. I believe the majority of Simsbury residents will follow the examples of boards and commissions by voting in support of preserving Meadowwoods if given the chance in the referendum on the budget. In addition to protecting our legacy of open space in Simsbury, this project also builds on the legacy of the civil rights movement in our country and provides a view of Simsbury many people do not yet know. As we look to enhance our individual and collective understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is another path to achieving a more just community. Of course, as we look at the threats posed by the climate crisis, it is important that we use resources now to help mitigate what will likely be overwhelming cost in the future. All protected open space builds on other preserved lands to create a stronger environment for our species to survive. Which brings me to the cost of not protecting this land. We can project out additional cost of a housing development on this property in regards to educating the children of any new homes, in addition to road maintenance, police and emergency services, the library, senior needs, and other town amenities, a number that will drown out the current $2.5 million purchase price that is the cost to Simsbury today. I believe this is exactly the kind of endeavor that residents of Simsbury will embrace. However, it is not up to me, but it should be up to the people of our town to fairly have a chance to decide this in the budget referendum. Thank you so much for the work you do in support of a better Simsbury and for your time this evening.
Thank you. So those are the individuals who signed up to speak live through Zoom meeting. It's pretty clear to me that you gained a great advantage in terms of your ability to elaborate on your points by signing up to speak at the public. We're going to have to think about this going forward. I do need to give notice of people who are have submitted, and I'm going to try to do this as efficiently as possible. Again, a strong urge for people to take half an hour or whatever and peruse the website that we put up a couple of times. Again, it's the Town of Simsbury Board of Finance agenda tab, and there's a list of all of these comments. What I'm going to do is they've been summarized and categorized for me as to what they basically say, and I'm going to try to read off names of people in each of these categories and do the best I can. And really apologies for some people that had done a really nice job sending in detailed, heartfelt conversations about these. But again, they're available to all of us. They've been made available to the Board of Finance members in advance of this meeting, and I would encourage you all to read that. So with your indulgence, I'm going to try to do this, and hopefully we'll be back together in the same room next year, and we will have a better way to do this. All right, I'm going to read off the names and addresses, if we have them, of people that and tell you what their basic category is. And so the first is a long list. There are, I think, over 100 names of people who submitted from a simple 1 or 2 line email to a more detailed elaboration, but the basic message was clearly we're in favor of the Meadowwood project. And sometimes that included whether it would be on the referendum or not, but all of these people are in support. So I'm going to go through them quickly as I can. Richard and Carol Afrigola of North Drive. Barry and Joanne Chasen, 17 North Drive. Fred Freeble, past president, Simsbury Land Trust. Judy and John Schaefer, Lost Brick Road, West Simsbury. Ashley Burke, Clifton Drive, Simsbury. Sean Burke, no address. Philip Banker, no address. Oh, I'm sorry, Hoskins Road. Randy Cole, Clifton Drive. Ike Scully, Notch Road, West Simsbury. Barbara Bush, Catherine Lane, Simsbury. Petra Chesanik, West Mountain Road, West Simsbury. Marvin and Charlie Kelly, Clifton Drive. John Sheffer, Clifton Drive. Excuse me. Stephen and Kathy McDonald, Clifton Drive. Ron Patterson, no address. Stephen Reed, Janet Reed, Tim Clark Circle. James McAlpine, Tower Drive. Richard and Jill Schlicker, no address. Kathy and John Earnhardt, Clifton Drive. Tammy Banks, no address. Marion Gilmore, Surrey Circle. Joanne Dombrowski, no address. Deborah Bishop, Hot Meadow Street. Edith Vassar. Paul Murphy, Wildwood Road. Terry Lane. Oh, this is Mr. Beach. You can read his in great detail. It's great. Really appreciate the birds. Glenn Knight. Marjorie Winters, who we heard from. Chris Anderson. Toby Winters. Tolly Sonnenberg. Tolly Gibbs. Danielle Diormo and family. Joseph Campolietta, we heard from Joseph. Long round, thank you. Deanne Tracy. Sally Rieger, Simsbury. Donna Summers. Pamela Cartledge. Robert Batondi, no address. Deborah Jan Olson, Jeffrey A. Olson, Hearthstone Drive. Zong Wang, Clifton Drive. Mark Schultz, Clifton Drive. Megan Puglisi, Hoskins Road. Kathleen and Stephen Bessette, Clifton Drive. Claire Sandstrom, Old Mill Court. Kelly Hodgson, Rockland Drive. Derek Magok, sorry if I missed that, 11 Clifton Drive. David and Cindy Franklin, 38 Clifton Drive. Mark and Allison Schmitz, Clifton Drive. Joe Carey. Helen Peterson. Alan Bradford, Canton Road, West Simsbury. Eugene Bolognese, Hot Meadow Street. John Gooch, Glen Hollow Lane. Garrett Caponetti. Then there are a lot of the following are principally quick emails saying, I have the right to vote. And they're requesting that we put this on the referendum. Heather Eversdyke, Michael Eversdyke, Ken and Ruth Jacobson, John Helmkamp, Bruce Metzger, Patricia Piano, Michael Park, Scott Riley, Barbara Wolf, Charles Wolf, Diane Nash, Krishna Diapa, Susan Brackwitz, Phyllis Grinspan, Dan Mudgett, Mark Silverman, Dr. Mark Silverman, Barbara Friedland, Frederick Metzger, Tracy Labonte, Linda Goodman, Susan Downs, Maria Adams, Diane Lagamba, Sarah Batchelder, Katie Galt, Karen and Bill Cordner, John Cobalt, Ed Roble, Aline Galen, Janet Beatty, Jonathan Gooch, Shauna Basine, Alexa Crystal, Karen Cordner, Bill Cordner again, Carolyn Stewart, Susan Prentice, Richard Stanley, Diana Moody, Arlene Zapil, Etta Bacari, sorry, Aaron Levitt Smith, Lori Fernand, Brett Aroniti, Lauren Roderick, Randy Chesanik, Lindsay Owens, we're more than halfway through, Margaret Gooch, Geetha Shenoy, Anna Call, Caden Halscheid, Kevin Kurian, Penelope Coking Sanborn, Paul Murphy, Dominic Avery, Emmy Crystal, Danielle Diarmo, Sandy Coombs, Kevin McDonough, Chuck Wolf, Virginia Garrett, Susan Van Cleef, Susan Messino. She referenced this in her talk again, a long 4 or 5 page letter. Michael Glenn, Joe and Elizabeth Carreri, David Galt, Lisa LeBond, Richard Hubner, Kyle Testerman, Wanda Coleman, Dwayne Royce, Shannon Leary Canal. Dr. Rinaldi actually wrote in opposition to Meadowwood. And again, I would refer you to the webpage to read his recommendation. Also talks about a petition. So this was different than the majority of those that I read you before. The following emails are largely in support of the Latimer Lane project. Totally in support of the following. Christina Bussolini, and let's see, this person wrote in, Latimer Lane, Becky and Kevin Mahoney, Teresa Berry in support of Latimer Lane, Dan Zatoon in support of Latimer Lane, Jenna and Patrick Caulfield in support of Latimer Lane, Catherine Fong in support of Latimer Lane, Lizzie Gavan in support of Latimer Lane, Anna De La Fay in support of Latimer Lane Elementary School. The following are in support of the the library, sorry. Holly McGrath in support of the budget, $8,000 basically. Amber Abul, support of the library. Ann Erickson in support of the library. Marianne O'Neill in support of the library. Mark McGrath in support of the library expense. Heather Getz in support of the library. John and Melissa Brett. Wrote in opposition to Meadowwood. John and Melissa Brett. Nord and Janine Christensen wrote in plea of no tax increases. It'd be a good time for a tax decrease, not an increase. Again, I refer you to the page, the webpage to read the full details. Mark Lebetkin asking for no tax increase. Time for a no frills budget. James Marsh, a long email about cutting expenses and taxes. Frank Bowden, again, fiscal responsibility, lower taxes. April and Michael Smith about raises to union employees. John Nagy. In support of the projects being done in Terriffill. Chris Evans writes in support of the traffic calming work to be done on Notch Road. Lori Coppinger, Parks and Rec, in support of the Parks and Rec expenditure for the new maintenance coordinator, maintenance technician, and other Parks and Rec activities. Rachel Wellman in support of Meadowwood and Parks and Rec. Almost done. David Johnson in support of funds to develop to fix the fields at Henry James. Rainier Blanchette. Favor of Meadowwood. Sarah Faulkner from the Audubon Society. So following, the rest of these are from out-of-town residents. And so I don't feel compelled to read them, but they are on the website. All right. Just one last comment with apologies for some inherent inequities in airtime. But again, all of these great comments have been submitted and available for review and were sent to the Board of Finance beforehand. All right, I'm going to take just a stop and ask our board to unmute and just go through what I think we're going to do from here, and checking that it is 8 o'clock, that I think we're right on schedule. So appreciate anybody who wants to stay. Everyone is welcome. That's why it's called a public hearing. We are going to conduct the rest of the business of the Board of Finance meeting. And that would be a discussion about referring the budgets in their current form or any other form to referendum. So I guess I'd ask just sort of poll the Board of Finance members to see what you would like to be sure we talk about and how we go about that. Art, you're unmuted, so you get to go first.
I'm in favor of proceeding with the schedule as distributed, Mr. Chairman. I thought the agenda was appropriate, and it's 8 o'clock, but this is important work, so I'm in favor of proceeding.
Okay, great. Let's see, Linda?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, good. All right. So that's fine. I just I guess what we would do is we would typically look at the resolutions that have been motions that have presented to us, and those we will do sort of one at a time and see what discussion ensues. All right.
Can I suggest we take a little 2-minute bio break?
That would be awesome. All right. All right. No more than 5. All right. Thank you, Linda, as always. All right. We'll be back in 5.
Woo. What were you hearing?
Ellen, just an FYI, you are not muted. So just looking out for you.
Put myself on mute.
Is Derek back?
Okay.
I lost Derek. Where's Derek? Oh, there you are, up on the right. Okay. All right, Linda, are you there?
I am.
Okay, good. All right. Okay. So I think the most efficient way to do this would be to go through the resolutions and then the referendum questions. And I'll read these, and then we'll stop at each one, and I would be looking for a motion on each one.
So, Rob, can you, this is Linda, can you do me a favor and just give us a sense of, we have a resolution on the Board of Selectmen budget, the Board of Ed budget, the capital budget, the Meadowwood land, the Latimer project. Each of those is a separate resolution.
Correct. Right.
And so after each one, we'll have discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's what that's what I was trying to say, so that we'll stop on each one and have a discussion about whether we're ready to send that to referendum. All right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to read from the information that Melissa gave me today. Melissa, nod your head. Okay. All right. So for the fiscal year 21-22, Board of Finance, final resolutions and referendum questions. Pursuant to Section 808 of the Town Charter, the following motions were introduced at the regular meeting of the Board of Finance on April 6th, 2021. Be it resolved that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Selectmen annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022, shall be approved and implemented in the amount of $25,117,980. Now I'm going to stop. This is not the question. This is the resolution. All right. We'll get to the question in just a minute. Let me read all of the resolutions. Second, be it resolved that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Education annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022, shall be approved and implemented in the amount of $73,881,930. Be it resolved that the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Sewer Use Fund, Sewer Treatment Plant, residential rental properties, Simsbury Farms, special programs, non-public schools, debt retirement, capital, and capital non-recurring annual budgets for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 shall be approved and implemented in the amount of $14,696,200. In accordance with sections 406, automatic referendum, and 808, duties of the Board of Finance on the budget of the charter, the recommended operating budgets will be submitted to a referendum in the following forms. So these are the questions as they will appear on the ballot. 1. Shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Selectmen annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 be approved and implemented in the amount of $25,117,980. And so we'll stop there and discuss our position on that.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make an overall comment?
Yeah.
I agree with your procedure. I'm finding this kind of an unpleasant task. It's not like, I feel like I've been watching a train wreck taking place over the last year. We announced, we set out our criteria, which we would adjust for the reality of the pandemic and the economic downturn. We were adamant about that. We discussed it at length. Everybody weighed in. We had Board of Finance consensus on that very strong point. We have received unusual funds this year, an unusually large grand list increase. We've got CARE funds coming in. We have state funds coming in. And yet we still have, we did not hold operating expenses flat. And yet we still are coming up with not enough money and call for a mill increase, which we cannot do. And I, for one, like schools. I like police. I like open spaces. I like culture and rec. I like good employees. I like talented teachers. I haven't heard anything that I don't like from tonight, but we cannot afford them all. And whom we have not heard from tonight, and I hear a lot from knocking on doors, is no tax increases. So I'm just saying that as we're about to do this, I'm in favor of everything that's been discussed. I cannot vote for everything that's been discussed because I do not want to send a referendum things that I do not think should be in the budget when we have clearly stated that we are not going to have a mill rate increase this year. And I particularly think operating expenses were too high. The compensation was quite rich. And if we wanted to have room for some of these extra things, we would have had to have created room there. So I totally agree with the procedure you're about to go through. I find it especially difficult. And I think it puts us in the position of voting against some very solid and good things that I would like to do just because we cannot afford it. And the overwhelming voices of voters, taxpayers, and small businesses that I hear from is, you said you were not going to increase taxes this year, and yet we have a 1% increase in there. So I commenced this process not being very pleased by the prospects in front of us, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate that.
Say again?
No, I appreciate that.
Okay.
Anyone else wish to speak? Lisa?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll take Dave Bush's recommendation and start with hello, friends, and thank everyone who spoke so beautifully tonight. Really, one of the things that frustrates us as a board is we feel like we don't hear from the public. And I do want to recognize everyone who really, so many people stepped up and how appreciative we are of all that. And also to thank everyone who worked on this budget. Rob mentioned it's really a collaboration between so many boards, staff, and the town manager and the superintendent. It's a big task that requires the balancing of many needs to meet fundings. And I especially want to recognize the efforts that the town took to keep everyone safe during these extraordinary times of COVID. I think people know it's touched my family quite a bit. And so I know how difficult that is. And I want to thank everyone for what they did. And I want to, in particular, recognize Amy, Matt, Maria, Melissa, and Tom, who put together all the emails for us tonight. In terms of the operating budget of the Board of Selectmen, I do want to just mention a few things, following up on arts. Every year when we door knock, or make phones or reach out to constituents, the number one concern, it's not even close, is taxes is a concern. And the governor, in his crafting his budget, did make a plea that we really pay careful attention to taxes so that we can reverse the damage from the last 12 months and ensure that Connecticut doesn't get trapped in a downward economic spiral for years to come. The Board of Selectmen itself has granted tax abatements because taxes are too high. So we know that this is a perennial issue, and it's always the balance of what do we want to spend and what can we afford to spend. And the Board of Finance's role in this process is really, in some ways it's threefold, right? And of course, it's really about, do we follow a fair process and reasonable process? Can we afford to do what we want to do? And does the public have adequate information to make an informed choice? And I do want to recognize that there are multiple challenges, and probably most of my comments will be focused around debt. But I do have some operating comments. And one is that in this year of challenges, there were some surprising positives. We had a very large grant list, the highest I've seen in years. We had the town manager and the director of finance on the town side are projecting about 500,000 projected savings in current year budget, $500,000. So there are some savings that were unanticipated. There is an infusion of federal dollars from the American Rescue Plan, and unlike any other time in history. And that's a large amount of money. It's about $3.5 million that we haven't really even discussed. And in December, the Board of Finance approved a supplemental appropriation for public works for road work that they received from Aquarian, and that was for over $600,000. And so I juxtaposed these positives with the observation that instead of leveraging these advantages to hold Texas flat, the town is proposing a tax increase at a time when many families are working more hours for less dollars. Simsbury's unemployment is still higher than typical. The cost of living adjustment for seniors is the third lowest in Social Security's history, and many of our businesses are still struggling. In the out years, it's the out years, however, that concern me the most, and we'll get to those projections in a second. When we talk about dollars, there are many ways to talk about dollars. We can say, oh, it's just $25 a year, or oh, it's just $80 a year. If we can lower that down to $6 or $8 a month. And that's a reasonable way to talk about it. But there's also another thing that's out there. With Ensign Bickford, for instance, just one of their contracts from the federal government, $28 million, which is more than our town's budget. And they were willing to pull up shop and leave town, but for a $30,000 abatement a year. So to them, $30,000 was significant. And I just point that out because you can couch numbers in any way you want, but as stewards of other people's money, we don't make a profit, we don't make widgets, we provide services, and we try and do it in the most efficient and meaningful way we can, being careful with our residents' dollars. And I want to recognize the staff and the boards of selectmen and the Board of Education, because I know they share that desire to do that, and the highest possible services for the most efficient costs. And that's a true commitment of everyone who works for the town of Simsbury and for the boards who work on it. But one of the things that was not able to be done was to find true efficiencies in the Board of Selectmen budget. So I do have a few suggestions to cut. They're minimal. And some might say, well, why bother? Do they really even move the mill rate? Do they, what's only pennies to each taxpayer? And so I went back and forth whether to bother. But then I thought to myself, but gee, Ensign Bickford was going to pull up shop over $30,000 a year, and their budget is bigger than ours. Do we have a responsibility to be stored? So I do have some suggestions for cuts, and I'm happy to make those when Rob thinks they're appropriate. They are minor, but like I said, I went back and forth as to whether to even make them because it's about $137,000. But then I thought, well, $130,000, that's 4 times more than was significant to Ensign Bickford. So depending on how you couch it, so Rob, when you let me know when you want me to make those suggestions.
I appreciate that. Let's maybe either Linda, Derek, or Kevin. Somebody.
I'm privy to know what Lisa's suggestions are going to be, so I will endorse in advance that it does make sense to me that we look at some additional ways of keeping taxes flat or close to flat this year, if at all possible.
Okay. And Kevin or Derek?
I mean, I agree with Art and Lisa and Linda about a lot of what they've expressed. I mean, specifically to Art, you know, he said he likes all the things. He likes the open space. He likes teachers. He likes the police. But the fact of the matter is we can't afford everything. And so there's just some hard decisions. Part of being on the Board of Finance is I feel like we have a fiduciary responsibility to not only look at today's budget, but also to look at the outlying years in a little bit closer light.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add, Rob. I would just say, in light of all of these numbers that get thrown around and these projects that get thrown around, one of the main things that I learned in going through an exhaustive facilities task force, and being on that, task force for the past couple of years, is that at the end of the day, we have to have a priority, because we can't do it all in the same year. We can't do it, all this year, next year, or even the year after that. So it comes down to a prioritization, because as Kevin mentioned, we are stewards of taxpayer dollars. So I can appreciate all the comments that came in, that you read from Rob and the people that spoke up tonight with a lot of courage. And then, of course, over 6,000 voters in Simsbury that we also have to, contemplate as well. So, I really don't have much other than that. We were voted into these positions to make these tough decisions. So, willing and
so I appreciate that, Derek, and I appreciate everybody's comments, including Art, especially teeing it up that way. I think it's every year it's a process, and I admitted to Lisa today that I get budget fatigue, and it sets in earlier sometimes every year, but that's not a reason not to do the job we were elected to do. And even though they might feel like small or tweaks, in the end, everything we can do will help. And I've never been a fan of taxing people this year so we don't have to tax them next year. I think if we have extra money in the budget, we should spend it and then not spend it again next year. So I'm also privy to some of Lisa's suggestions. At the risk of running these all through the budget, I think we should do it if we are in favor of that. And maybe if you could, you've shared this with a few of us, Lisa. Can you do it in a fairly quickly and efficient way?
No, but I'll do my best. You know me too well. I will do my best. Yeah. So first of all, I do want to say the other thing Kevin pointed out that I forgot to mention is at some point I do want to do the 5-year look, and it's important sort of people understand, and we can pull up that chart. I don't want to forget to do that because I think it's exactly right. Some of the decisions we're making today. So one of the things we looked at staff projections on current year savings, and to Rob's point, should we tax tomorrow when we have dollars that we've already taxed for today? And those savings include about 5,000 in land use commissions. Between police and dispatch, they're looking at $190,000 worth of savings in the current budget. Engineering about 10,000, public works 80,000, senior center and social services about 32. Library 121,000, and benefits about 88,000. And instead of utilizing those savings, the plan is to tax for some stuff in next year's budget. And I understand the finance director's reluctance to use current year savings before the close of the fiscal year, as these estimates absolutely can change. And I respect that comment and appreciate that analysis. And so I would therefore sort of recommend we use the capital reserves fund, which we've taxed for and we have in reserve, to fund some current year spending, and then use any end of year savings of that 500 we anticipate, whether it's more or less, we can then replenish the capital reserve fund. So it's in essence doing the same thing, but using a fund that is more stable, where we know the dollar amounts, and then using the uncertain amount to replenish. So I would recommend that the Board of Finance appropriate the following projects from the Capital Reserve Fund: 65,000 CNR, and that's of the 110 CNR. So for traffic calming and clubhouse repairs, I would recommend we fund those out of the Capital Reserve Fund. I would recommend that we fund 9,000 for the library out of the Capital Reserve Fund. I would recommend we fund 9,000 in police de-escalation training out of the Capital Reserve Fund. And the question is, so it's not really a cut, right? But it is mill rate relief, and it's using dollars we've already taxed for. So to me, that feels like an appropriate way to get some mill rate relief. I always go back to the senior citizens. Their Social Security COLA increase is the third lowest in the history of Social Security this year. So that sort of do that. Then the other cuts I have, one is actually not a cut. It's a lateral transfer, and I'll start with that. Because police, and Sean, I think, will appreciate this perhaps more than anyone on all the boards, but because police cruisers will be a yearly recurring expenditure, I recommend we transfer the capital expenditure to the police department budget as a CNR transfer, just as we do the cruisers. And as we do the plow trucks and public works. That's a budget neutral change, but what that does is it makes that base capital for future years. It now becomes part of the permanent budget of the police department, so not competing with other capital projects in the future. To me, as Sean knows, I view base capital as things that you have to spend every year. Those shouldn't be in competition for other capital. And to Derek's point about prioritizing, those are things we have to do every year. So that would be a lateral move. The next thing I would recommend is that we look at police overtime. There's been Maria's 3-year plan to raise that for $25,000, but as we're seeing, there's already $190,000 in savings in the current year budget. I don't think we need to increase the overtime amount. It's not a reduction, it's a hold flat. And the reason why I'm recommending that is because the chief has said he anticipates having difficulty filling those positions. So there will be savings in the next current year budget to accommodate any overtime. Or if he fills those positions, there will be less need of overtime. I would also add to that that part of the American relief plan by President Biden does permit some funding for police activities and overtime. So there is likely going to be another source of funding there as well. So I don't really see that as meaning they have to reduce overtime. It's just the way we're funding it. So that would be a reduction that would give mill rate relief without an impact on services or the department. Then to make Culture, Parks, and Rec whole, this is something I don't think we would vote on today, but I would recommend, they're projecting about $136,000 in deficit. And a lot of that's from COVID expenditures. And it doesn't make sense to me to hold them responsible to that. This is an extraordinary time. One of the things the American Rescue Plan is likely to permit is that the payment of lost revenues. So there may be another fund there. We don't have guidance on that yet, but I think that's going to be another source of funding there. But if that source of funding doesn't come through, I would absolutely support and encourage our board to support using the Capital Reserve Fund to make them whole there. They should not be held responsible to that loss due to a global pandemic. One of the things Culture, Parks, and Rec is doing this year is, first of all, goes out to Dave Bush. I'm very much in support of the new position. And I'm very much in support of the fact that we shifted some of the costs out of the Culture, Parks, and Rec revenue fund into the general operating budget. That makes sense, fully supportive of it. One of the things Culture, Parks, and Rec is doing is they have budgeted $30,000 more in revenue than expenditures. So in other words, they budgeted a little bit of a reserve, but the town has transferred 180 every year to Culture, Parks, and Rec. And I think we can reduce that transfer to 150 because it doesn't make sense to have two reserves. The general fund can be a reserve if they fall short. It doesn't need to be a separate reserve. And like I said, I think there's going to be American Rescue Plan funds available. And if there isn't, it's certainly appropriate to use Capital Reserve Fund to make them whole. They should not be held responsible for losses due to COVID. And so with all that, it's about a total mill rate relief of about $137,000 without really impacting services in any way. This is in addition to the increase in the building fees of $125,000, the $22,000 Spirit Council funding from current year savings, and the $25,000 $1,000 reduction in legal fees. I did want to just make mention to the library. You're only asking for $9,000 and you've got $120,000 projected savings. It seems like a no-brainer to give that some thought as you get to your end close, if there's a need there. I know you guys have been struggling. So those are my recommendations. And if you want to go through them one by one on a vote.
I'm trying to figure out a way to get this to the point where it's a motion and we can get the numbers into the budget. So if I understand what you're proposing, Lisa, that some of the items that are in the 21-22 budget, you would pull into this year and pay for them out of the capital reserve fund.
Or, you don't even need to do that. If they need it before, or we could just budget for them out of the capital reserve fund. It takes them out of the mill rate calculation.
Even if they happen next year, doesn't have to be done this year.
Correct.
All right.
So my motion would be.
And what's the magnitude of that?
That's $82,000, and that would include the paying for traffic calming. That goes to Chris Evans' email that he wrote. Thank you for writing, Chris. And the clubhouse repairs, I would pay for out of capital reserve fund. I would pay for the $9,000 that the library has requested out of the capital reserve fund, and I would pay $9,000 out of the police de-escalation training.
All right. So if you add what's the total of all of that?
Amy, can you just double check my math? But I believe it's 82,000.
At 83,000.
I'm thank God for Amy.
All right. And so Amy, so that's one piece of it. What else? What's the other piece is to reduce
You want to do a motion on those first, or do you want
to do that? Let's do that.
So I make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right. You want to make the second?
The second motion I'll make is a budget mill rate neutral change to the way we budget for police cruisers, and make that a yearly recurring expenditure by transferring that to the police department budget as a CNR transfer, much as we do the cruisers. That will protect those purchases for future years.
So you've made that motion. I'm looking for a second.
Okay.
All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. That passes.
The third motion I would make is that we hold police overtime flat, which is a $25,000 reduction in the proposed budget. It's not a decrease from last year. It's a holding flat. And there are alternative sources to pay for any overtime that is needed.
So that's a motion.
It is.
Somebody second that?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? What?
Opposed.
Mr. Peterson's opposed. All right.
The next motion this one I don't think we need to make a motion yet because we don't have, when is the close of year for Culture Parks and Rec, Amy?
The close, June 30th, the same as ours.
Oh, it's the same? I thought we changed that. No?
No.
Okay. Then we can do that at end of year closeout, or I guess I would looking for a consensus or a sense of the board, whether we'd be willing to make them whole for the loss in their revenue due to Culture Parks and Rec, either through the either through the American Rescue Plan or through the Capital Reserve Fund.
So how does that impact the 21-22 budget?
It doesn't. It's just a recognition that, in some ways it does, because we're going to reduce their budgeting of a reserve number. And part of the reason they were looking to add a reserve number was to pay off some of the losses in revenue. And we're going to pay that off because they should not be held to that standard because of COVID.
But again, if it doesn't directly impact this number, we should talk about it at our next meeting.
Okay. But am
I missing something?
Well, so if I can just jump in, I just want to endorse the general concept of, and I've said this many times in the past about other components of state government, that we don't each need to have our own private little reserves. We have reserves, and that's what they're there for. And I don't want everybody to get in the habit of having, well, we have our Culture Parks and Recs reserve, we have our Board of Ed reserves, we have our police department. I mean, any of them can come to the one main reserves if they have a bad year. That's what it's there for. Once we start having all these dispersed little bits of reserves, then that doesn't help us with bond ratings. Standard & Poor's doesn't look at all those little pots of money around, and it just sort of muddies the waters. So
just a quick correction on that. They actually do look at that, and they want to see reserves outside of the general fund.
Ah, okay. I've never heard that before.
But we do have a capital reserve fund.
All right. So again, I'm about process. So are we going to make a motion there, or we're going to just?
So I'll make a motion that we reduce the Culture Parks and Rec transfer line item from 180 to 150.
Okay.
And I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right. And so is that what? Have anything else, Lisa?
I do have one last thing, and I'm sorry to do it, but I think before we vote on the budgets, if we could take a look at the 5-year
Okay.
levy rate. Amy, if you could pull that up, just because I think it's important that the public understand, especially this year, when some of the decisions we're making are going to impact not this year, but in current years. And if you could turn to the levy page, there we go. Is there any way you can make that bigger for my old eyes?
There we go.
Okay, and if you could scroll down to projected impact on taxes. Keep going all the way.
You just got to get rid of the hashtags.
Okay, and if you stop there, you can sort of see, Amy, if you could point to column E, the projected taxes this year, the median, you'll see, right, 8,000 is the median taxes, and it's about an $80 increase which is what Rob and Eric had mentioned, and that's pretty reasonable. And we looked at a $400,000 impact. If you go down, you can see it's about 10,000 and then 13,000. And then you jump to the next year. If you go over to column G, and suddenly the tax increases we're projecting is about 359, and then 468 if you have a $400,000 home, and then 585 if you have a more expensive home. And you go, holy moly, what's going on there? And there's two things that are going on there. One is there's a grand list contraction. That's when Rob showed the grand list. We're going to see a grand list reduction that year. And so that's where that's going to hit. And that's a big impact on the tax bill. The pension assumptions we're making start to hit that year. And the CNR plan, that capital non-recurring plan that Maria has presented, which has about 4 million planned spending that doesn't have a funding source. So right now that would be taxes. So do I think we're going to be there? I don't know. I don't think so, but this is the plan that's been presented to us. So I do want to put it out there and let people see that. I think the American Rescue Plan may give us a source of funding that we'll be able to use to reduce that. I think that there is more in our capital reserve fund than perhaps might have been there had we had used some of that cash for Meadowwood. So that may be able to reduce some of the planned tax increase there. But I wanted to point that. And then if you go over to I, you'll see again, tax increase about 300, 406, 507. And what's happening there? Well, again, it's a grand list flat. The pension plan is hitting the CNR plan. And that's the year when our debt service hits. When we jump, right now we're at about 5.4 million in debt service. That year we get closer to, we're in fiscal year 24, we get closer to 8 million in debt service. That's a big jump, 2.5 million, and that's reflected in the taxes we pay. And then if you go to the next column over, you'll see things get a little bit better. We've got grand list of about 1 million, so it's a little bit tepid. It's no longer, stark. It's a little bit better. The pension plan is still hitting. The capital non-recurring plan spend is still there, and debt service is hitting. And then you go to the next one over, and you'll see we start to get a little bit better. And why is that? Well, the grand list becomes a little bit more moderate. We're anticipating about 2 million in grand list to hit then. The capital non-recurring plan and debt service is now baked into the budget. So, but you'll see there's going to be a period where taxes have the potential to go very, very high, actually higher than they've been in the last decade. And some of that's going to be driven by debt service, not all of it. Some of it's going to be driven by grand list, and some of it's going to be driven by the capital non-recurring plan. What could change to make that better? A lot of things. Maybe the grand list explodes, but we're using the information that Amy and staff has given us on their best projections of what it'll be. Maybe we can use the American Rescue Plan. Maybe the infrastructure dollars that Biden is thinking about pushing through will offset. So there are things that could change, but I do want to, one of the things we do is we look at, okay, what do we know today? And what are our best guesses of what could happen? And I just want to make sure people understand that this is coming down the road. Is it all because of Meadowwood? No. Is it all because of Latimer Lane? No. But some of it is. And some of it's because of grand list growth, and some of it's because of normal growth of the budgets. So these are the things, when we think about our budget today, we're sort of looking out and saying, well, what's coming down the road and how are we going to plan for that? And we're slowly, our pension assumptions are being worked in over a 4-year period. And this board is committed to doing that. So that's not something I think we're going to move from. It has to be done. We have to keep the promises we made to our workers, and we should. So some of that is hitting. So just that's a context and sort of what keeps us up at night. And that's why we've asked Maria, when she gets information on the American Rescue Plan, to please forward that to us as soon as she gets it, so that we can keep on current guidance. So I just want to put that out there. And again, because there's so many people watching, I just want to give huge kudos to Amy Merriweather, who developed this model, which took a lot of work. There's a lot of estimates she did. She gave her best conservative estimates of where she thought the town was going to need to fund. Thank Maria for her work on the capital non-recurring plan. We were able to put that in here in terms of town needs. But what the story tells is really, I think what Derek said, is there's a lot, and even what Art said, there's a lot we're going to want to fund. But looking at those mill rate increases, we know in the next 3 years, there's going to be a lot we're not going to be able to fund. So I would just, as a caution, make that point.
Yeah, I mean, I would just, emphasize that these are additive numbers. If you look at E versus M, you're talking about over $1,000 increase in taxes year over year for the owner of a median home value today. So it's definitely meaningful.
Yeah, and if you have a $500,000 home, it's really almost $1,700 more in taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't seen this kind of tax increase scenario really in over a decade. So it's worth sort of raising the discussion point, with the recognition that there are going to be things we can do to get it down, but they're going to require some harder choices. That's all.
Okay, noted. And some good work. And the 8% cap is when we start to feel it, like 24 and 25 and all of this. So something's got to give. All right, so we have made motions to amend the Board of Selectmen budget. And I suspect Amy needs time to run that all through, but she probably already has it done. So why don't we, before we vote on all of these, actually vote on sending these to referendum? Should we go through all of them?
Sure. Does Melissa need time to redo the referendum questions?
Yeah, I need to give Melissa the updated numbers.
Yeah, Amy will give us the updated numbers, and I'll write them in and read them as correct, right? That's what we'll do?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so let's go to the second question, and then we'll come back and we'll put in the final numbers and then read them all and vote on them, all right? So shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Education annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 be approved and implemented in the amount of $73,881,930?
I'll move that.
Someone want to second that?
I'll second.
All right.
Here I was seconding, and all to myself.
Oh. So now I'm going to retrace what I said. Let's vote on this to send it to referendum. That's what we're doing right now. Is everybody okay with that? That's the motion that you made, Lisa?
Sorry, I guess I went out of turn. Yes, that was the motion I made.
Okay,
I have no
that's fine.
changes to that budget. And I think
I confused it by saying we weren't actually voting on it now. We have not actually voted on the Board of Selectmen budget yet because we don't have the final number. We're voting actually on this. And you've moved it and Derek seconded it. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Kevin? Eric? Derek? All right, good. Next. So we're going to come back to the Board of Selectmen when we're done. Shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the sewer use fund, sewer treatment plant, residential rental properties, Simsbury Farms special programs, non-public schools, debt retirement, capital and capital non-recurring annual budgets for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 be approved and implemented in the amount of $14,696,200.
So that one includes the special revenue fund. So you need to reduce the number by $30,000. So
the CNR also, Amy, or does that not get impacted here?
Yes, you're right. It does. I need a minute on that one.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to number 4. So now we have to come back to 2 of the 3 so far. All right, number 4. Shall the town of Simsbury appropriate $2,515,860 for the purchase and improvement of Meadowwood, approximately 288 acres of undeveloped land located off Hoskins Road, County Road, and Firetown Road, and authorize bonds and notes in the same amount to finance said appropriation?
I'll move that.
Looking for a second.
Can I make a comment on that?
You may.
First of all, I want to thank everyone who made comments on this. I mean, I think, and I want to particularly thank Marjorie Winters, Susan Messina, and Helen Peterson, who have explained to me the ecological value of that property. I've used sort of the Board of Finance's role in this is kind of like a judge. Has the town put forward enough information, by the town, I mean the Board of Selectmen, to us for us to view this as a reasonable expenditure? And part of our reasonableness is, have they explained it well enough? And does it fit within our affordability measures? When the town manager's budget was initially presented, the chart that Rob showed showed debt service really almost at 14%. And to me, that would not have been reasonable to put before the public. So we did ask the Board of Selectmen to go back and look at debt service and get that to a reasonable level so that we could put it before the voters to let them choose. And they did that. And that is a really hard thing to do. There were a lot of things that didn't make the list because of those choices. There's the Simsbury High School Stadium got pushed out. The Senior Center got pushed out. Simsbury High School turf got pushed out. Henry James got pushed out. tennis courts got pushed out, Iron Horse parking lot got pushed out, dam evaluations and repairs got pushed out, and now road construction got pushed out. And they did that to make that fit within our affordability measures. And they did that. So to me, whether I like the project or not, and I'm not going to comment on my personal opinion there, have they given us enough to put this to the voters to decide? Is it reasonable enough to put it to the jury? And in this case, the jury is the voters. And to me, they have done that. So the question is whether I like the project or not, have they done their job well enough? And I'm not going to say it's perfect because I do have some issues with the process, but have they done their job well enough that we let the voters decide? And to me, they have done their job well enough. You know, I'm not sure I'm going to use this time to talk about the problems I have with the process, but it is good enough to send it to the voters from my perspective.
So we really are unable to move this forward without a second to the motion. Does anyone want to speak to their reluctance to second the motion?
I'll do that. This is a really tough one. I do want to thank people who testified. You know, I'm a big outdoor person myself, and you start talking about birds, it affects my heart. But this is a very tough issue, and it's a question of priorities and process, as Lisa talked about, and I will talk a little bit about the process. You know, this project was never on the CIP previously. We have this CIP process of putting things on for 6 years, and generally, unless it's a real emergency, things move through that 6-year spreadsheet and come to be in the first position over time. And, you know, by moving this one up when it's never been on there before, as Lisa pointed out, it did bump a bunch of other projects, including projects that weren't even on the CIP, that never managed to get on the CIP. So that, you know, there are other ways that this money can be spent. And I think there is an importance of how things should be prioritized. And I think, you know, I really honor that all these advocates spoke in favor of this today. I can tell you when I was in the legislature, people would come in droves and all advocate for the one particular project that they wanted. And my question for them was always, great, I'm glad you like that project. What would you cut in order to put this in place? And nobody through hundreds and hundreds of people ever wanted to put something else up to cut, nor did they ever want to raise taxes. Our job as the Board of Finance is to look at that bigger picture. And I think a lot of the folks who were speaking to us today or who wrote to us, and I did read their comments in advance, you know, they're not saying that they support eliminating or deferring other projects. They're just looking at this one project in isolation. And we, on the other hand, are expected to look at the entire context of competing projects and on the impact on future years, as Lisa pointed out with that bigger spreadsheet that Amy put up. You know, our future tax increases are going to be quite substantial. And working families and senior citizens alike are going to find these increases of hundreds and even thousands of dollars to be very onerous. And by the time you see the delayed impact of today's capital decisions, it's going to be too late to do anything about them because we've already committed to them. When we were talking with the Board of Selectmen a week or two ago, I really appreciated something that Chris Peterson said. He pointed out that the town and the Board of Selectmen, you know, we keep trying to meet budget guidelines by shifting dollars around or cutting needed staff, but not really ever looking at real reductions. And, you know, I think he was kind of saying that he didn't say it exactly this way, but I heard him basically saying, you know, at some point we're going to have to look at not just trying to do more with less, but actually looking at doing less with less. And this totally flies in the face of that very suggestion. You know, we're looking at adding land to a department we all agree is understaffed, which is Culture, Parks, and Recs. Like Lisa, I totally endorse the addition of a position there. They desperately need it. We're looking at adding land and responsibility and costs to the town, reducing revenue that we now enjoy at a time when we don't have the money to, maintain everything that we already have. Dave Bush mentioned obliquely, and heard from another individual on his board that, we are putting off addressing the irrigation system at the golf course. Last year, and you might remember me saying this, we invested loads of money in building the Riverside Park down in the old Betty Hudson property there. I forget the exact name of that park now. It's, it was lovely when it was built, and we had a very dry summer. And because we didn't have $10,000 to put into putting an irrigation system in place, a lot of the trees, bushes, and grass that were planted at expense to the town died. When you don't invest in your irrigation system, you're just throwing money away. So was putting off the irrigation system at the golf course the right priority? If we have another drought and that system doesn't work, we'll be looking at, tons of money to repair that golf course, as well as lost revenue because people aren't going to want to golf there. So, I'm hesitant to take this land off our taxable grand list. It's about $220,000 a year that they pay. And I can tell you, we heard from some of the advocates today that, by not building houses, you save money. But I did an analysis using our assessor's data for the last 10 years. This last year, we actually had a significant increase in our grand list because of business growth like Big Y. But almost all of the grand list growth over the prior 10 years in this very residential town came from homes, not from businesses. This grand list growth, which came from homes, is what enabled budget growth over the years without having to levy crippling tax increases. I personally think they probably won't immediately run out and build on this land, but eliminating current tax revenue and future growth is, I fear, going to lead Simsbury to become a town where only the wealthy can afford the property taxes here, and where small businesses are driven out of businesses, and low-income families or working families with kids and senior citizens, they're not going to be able to afford to live here. This isn't about me. I'm lucky I can afford to pay these higher taxes, but a lot of people can't. And my concern is for those young families and senior citizens and small businesses who struggle to make ends meet. And, I think we need to pay attention to them, particularly at a time when we are talking statewide about affordable housing. Some people did say that, they think that the people of Simsbury should be allowed to decide this in a referendum. We know from experience that if every voter in Simsbury was educated about the pros and cons of this decision and every voter voted, I would agree. But most people are not informed and they don't vote. We know that the voter turnout for these budget votes is very low. And I appreciate that staff have worked, in recent years to get that up, but it's still very, very low. And so what happens is all the single issue voters come out in response to organized campaigns, as we saw here tonight, and the average citizen doesn't even know that the budget vote is taking place. So they expect us on the Board of Finance to represent them and to make decisions based on what's best for the town overall and not what's best for the interests of a vocal special interest group. And again, I really appreciate that all these folks came out and submitted testimony. It was moving and compelling, but and I know they did so with the feeling that what they're advocating is doing the right thing. And I might disagree with them, but I really honor their right to express their opinion as citizens. But I have to do what I think is right as a Board of Finance member. And the Board of Finance is not supposed to just pass everything through from the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed or from citizen groups. Not supposed to just pass everything through to referendum. We're supposed to exercise judgment about the big picture, about competing priorities, about future needs, and also current requests. If we're not going to exercise that judgment, then what's the point of having a Board of Finance? So sorry to be so long-winded, but those are my comments.
I appreciate that, Linda.
Could I add something after everyone has spoken?
Art, did you want to add something?
Oh, I'll yield to Lisa.
Okay.
So a couple of points. One, Linda is one of my dear friends, as is everyone on this board. So let me just say publicly how much I love all members of this board and how I think everyone's really trying to do the right thing. I want to put that out there. I do, part of the growth in residents that Linda has pointed to has come from apartments, which are technically commercial growth, but that's
where people live.
Yeah,
it's not business,
but it's classified differently. Yeah. So I will just want to clarify that point. And the other thing, I appreciate Linda's point about how many people show up at referendum, and it really is only about 6%, and that makes it hard to put questions to voters where only 6% are going to show up. On the other hand, everyone has a right to show up. But so I go back and forth on that point, but I do appreciate Linda pointing that out, and I think it's very, very valid. This, in terms of what our role is, we gave affordability metrics to the boards and asked them to come in with that. And I think in some ways we're substituting what we think those priorities should be. And I'm not sure that that is our role, and that may be where we differ in terms of the roles of the Board of Finance. But I think because they did come in with the affordability metrics that we put forward, and they did prioritize their projects, to Derek's point, and some things did fall off the list, I'm supportive of letting the voters decide if they agree with the Board of Selectmen's choices, knowing that certain things fell off, which is why it was very important to me to highlight what didn't make the list. There's no senior center. There is no Henry James Middle School edition, but it's not just because of Meadowwood. What's really driving this is Latimer. And so I just want to, I think these are hard choices. I do think the point made, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Once it's gone, it's gone. On the other hand, I think Linda made the point, and it's worth noting that, if the town did take this, 90% of the land we would prohibit affordable housing on through easements at a time when there's been such discussion on that. But that said, that's a policy choice of the Board of Selectmen. And I think it is appropriate to let the voters decide this issue. So I'll stop there because I think I'm starting to get repetitive. But I do want to acknowledge to the public that every member on this board is doing what they think is in the best interest of the town. And I know these are hard decisions, but I do want to speak to how much respect I have for every member on the Board of Finance and really on the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education.
Okay, Art.
Mr. Chairman, I respect and appreciate the articulate debate, the issues that have been brought forth by our two colleagues just now. I suggest that you do not have a second to this motion and therefore recommend that you move to the next item on the agenda.
I appreciate that. And I think we have no other choice. So let's do that. So the final, so you have two more motions, and then we'll go back and pick up the two that we have adjusted numbers on. So the next is, shall the town of Simsbury appropriate from the sewer use fund and anticipated grants $3,250,000 for berm improvements at the water pollution control facility? Looking for a motion for that.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so that's been referred. And then the last is, shall the town of Simsbury appropriate $36,792,406 for the renovation and expansion of Latimer Lane Elementary School and authorize bonds and notes in the same amount to finance said appropriation?
A question?
Yes?
We're not authorizing bonds and notes for 36 million. Is that right, Amy? Just for 25 million?
25.7.
No, so we have to authorize it for the full amount in case the grants don't come through, although they always do come through. And then we also authorize the full amount because if there is something that we are anticipating to be covered by the grant that doesn't end up being covered by the grant, we have to have the full appropriation in order to cover it.
Okay, thank you. I'll move that then.
This is consistent, just clarification, this is consistent with all of the other projects we've done similarly, correct?
You got it. Yep.
Yep. All right.
But Amy, question then, we're not doing the full appropriation for Meadowwood because that's dependent on the grant for 400,000?
Because we're not getting all of those grants. And if we didn't get any of the grants, that project dies.
But we are getting the one for 400,000.
So that one's coming to us, I guess. But it doesn't matter because if we don't get it, then the project dies. So our max appropriation for Meadowwood would be 2.5 million, whether we have grants or not.
So if we don't get the state grants, we bond for the full 36 million?
Theoretically, yeah.
It doesn't just die then?
No, the Latimer does not die. Meadowwood dies.
Yeah, two different things.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so are you?
Can I ask another question?
Well, before you do that, let me confirm that we have a motion on the table. Lisa?
And I'll second the motion.
Okay, all right. So now we're in discussion. Do you have a question?
So it's about, in the past, like when we did the Henry James project or any other big school project, did we have some assurance from the state? Had they reviewed a project and given some early approval of the proposed architectural plan or any of that sort of thing? Or were we in the same position as we are now with no idea whether the town or whether the state will come up with their piece, but with the expectation that they probably will.
When Burke went through the Henry James project, and it was the same thing. We had to bond for the full amount of the renovations.
I know we had to bond for the full amount, but had the state given some preliminary approval that we don't know?
Yeah, Neil, maybe Neil can answer that for us.
Yeah,
so there's a process through the Office of School Construction and Grant Reimbursement that we are already underway with. Basically your project goes forward based on it heading to the next legislature for school construction. So Jeff Wazinski, who's on the call from Tecton, can talk you a little bit more through that. But basically, if your project moves forward, that state reimbursement is guaranteed. So I'm going to ask Jeff to speak to that.
But did they give us a preliminary approval on Henry James, and do we not have a preliminary approval now? I'm just trying to understand.
Sure. My name's Jeff Wazinski, Tecton Architect. Yep. I can shed some light on this. There's three deadlines that you should be aware of. There's a June 30th grant application, which is basically a series of items that need to be approved and sent in with a grant application checklist. That goes to the state. It's relatively minor costs associated with getting that in there. That goes into the state, they review it, and they come out with what's called a priority list. That comes out December 15th of the same year. So that would be December 15th of 2021. That shows you that basically it's all a listing of all the projects that they're going to send to the legislation in the spring for final approval. So the last step, taking that priority list and then sending it through for the various approvals, you get your approval in the spring of 2022. And some communities, most communities, and I believe Henry James waited. You can't put a shovel in the ground until you get the final grant approval from the state. So there's some risk, but it's relatively minor. It's the grant the work applicable to the grant application than if the town chooses to proceed with design.
So what I hear you saying, Jeff, is there isn't really a process of them giving you sort of a preliminary, yep, that probably looks good. There isn't any of that.
There are going to be a couple conversations early on, previously, prior to the official grant submission about, explaining the budget, explaining the programming, the educational specifications, those kinds of things, because they want to see it before it actually gets sent in. But those are the three real, I call it checkpoints that from a town perspective, you should be concerned with and focus on.
Okay, and those conversations haven't happened yet.
We have a couple preliminary meetings already scheduled with OSCGNR prior to the grant application.
So, Amy, are we able to adjust the motion to base it off of approval of state grants?
So I believe that we can, but honestly, that would be a bond council question because I'm 99% sure that Judith would have us keep the motion with the full. But you can ask bond council.
Because it sounded like what from Jeff said, there was some risk of us not getting the grants.
So if we weren't going to get the grants, and I won't speak for Matt or Neil, but I don't think that they would be supportive of the project at bonding the full 36 million. So I think that would be like another conversation.
We couldn't afford it.
Well, I guess it would be helpful to understand the process because I think once we approve the appropriation, it is fully in the Board of Selectmen's power to go ahead and bond the full amount. So what would that do to our debt service line if that were to happen? I understand that's, I guess what we're trying to get from Jeff is how likely is that? And should we do the motion for the bonded amount or the full amount? And what do we need to do to get the grants?
My experience has been basically bonding for what Amy had mentioned, the full amount. It doesn't give the authorization to build the project. And once you submit a grant application and you're on the priority list, I've never not had a project be funded.
So you think the risk is very low?
Yeah, I think it's very low. And still better yet, the town does not have to build the project if the state doesn't approve the grant, which I've never had happen to me in my career.
Okay.
I would say the risk is low.
And the Board of Education has obviously seen the debt service line. I guess I would ask, is that your sense as well? To matter.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Lisa. And this is consistent with how we've approached other projects in the past.
Perfect.
That's what I was trying to get at, was
Yeah.
the same process.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're ready to vote.
Yeah. So Lisa, you moved it, correct?
I did.
All right. And Linda, you seconded it.
I did. I do have some further comments.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded. We're still in discussion. Please make your further comments.
Let me say that I completely agree that Latimer Lane needs capital improvement, and I don't dispute the need to do this in investment. But I do have concerns about the whole process for review of this capital outlay, which is quite significant. And maybe my recollection's fuzzy of how we've done it. We don't do these things all that often, but it seems to me that we should have looked first at debt capacity to accommodate projects, much as like a home buyer would look at, what size loan do they qualify for before they go out and look at houses so that they can tell the realtor what price range they can afford. And then we should get an architectural plan. I noted that in Farmington in the news recently, they had like 6 alternate plans they were looking at and letting people weigh in on which plan and what the dollar amount would be. And instead, I feel like what we're doing is, and I'm doing it too, committing to $25.7 million for a project that doesn't yet have an architectural plan. And that makes me very uncomfortable. I asked how many classrooms would be built, and I was told that we don't know yet. So how do we know that 25.7 million is the right number? I will vote to do this. I do get that there's urgency here, but I just think I would just advocate as a sidebar here that we on the Board of Finance, and this isn't a criticism of the Board of Ed or the Board of Selectmen in specific, it's all of us, including us on the Board of Finance, that we need to establish some kind of protocol for future use and how we address large capital projects and how they get prioritized. And, at what point do we approve the large amount of money? Do we need an architectural plan first? Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not the expert on this sort of thing, but it just seems to me we ought to have a process in place. And I would ask my colleagues on the Board of Finance to really commit to looking at this and working with the other 2 boards to have a more, robust process in the future for projects of this size or any size. So I'll shut up now.
I think that's a worthy goal to have better communication, better involvement earlier in projects. I know the Board of Ed, many studies on this, worked very, very hard on this.
Absolutely. I know they did.
They prioritized and did all the rest of this. The need, I don't think we're challenging the need.
No. It's my biggest discomfort is that we don't have an architectural plan, but we have an estimate, and I don't get how that works. And it seems like we're putting the cart before the horse, that we ought to know exactly what we're building and then get an estimate.
Well, the precision of the estimate is sort of surprising, but the fact that it's an estimate at this point is not to me. But we have good consultants through Tecton and others, and it probably won't be the final price because it hasn't. We're months away from putting the shovel on the ground. So
one of the most expensive pieces of development project are the drawings. So a lot has to happen before a shovel gets put in the ground, and we have to commit to spending those dollars. And to Rob's point, whatever number we think it will be in total will not be the number. It'll likely be a little bit higher, just the nature of doing business. But hopefully we're protected by guaranteed maximum contracts and other things that developers and groups like Jeff can protect us. So,
but that's my very concern. Was that Derek?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's my very concern, Derek, about process is that. What if we approve 25.7 and it turns out to be 32.8? Then we're back here, and then we really are above the 8%. You see what I'm saying? I feel like our process. This isn't a dispute about Latimer Lane. It's about the process.
Yeah, I think we need to put our faith in the professionals and the experts that do this on a daily basis. We're not going to be approving line item. Budget line items on a development budget. We'll be protected.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. We've had our discussion. I'm going to ask for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. We're going to go back then and do the Board of Selectmen budget. So I'll read it again with its exact numbers. This is question number one. Shall the appropriation recommended and approved by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of the Board of Selectmen annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 be approved and implemented in the amount of $24,979,980? I need a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved by Linda, seconded by Lisa. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. And the question number three, shall the appropriation, is this one? Yeah, recommended by the Board of Finance for the purposes of paying the expenses of sewer use fund, residential rental property, Simsbury Farms, special programs, non-public schools, debt retirement capital, and capital non-recurring annual budgets for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 be approved and implemented in the amount of $14,666,200. I need a motion to that effect.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Seconded by Derek. All in favor, say aye. 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 All right. So we are moving these questions to the referendum, and for the avoidance of doubt, we are not moving the question number 4 regarding Meadowwood. All right. We also have more work to do, and this has to do with the resolutions Board of Finance and resolutions of Board of Selectmen. Both of us have to approve this. Fortunately, we do not have to read the whole thing. So upon motion duly made, seconded, and adopted, the reading into the minutes of the full text of the resolution set out below is waived. Copies of the resolutions having been made available to those in attendance and recorded in these records immediately preceding these minutes. So I need a motion to that effect to waive the reading of this.
So moved.
And a second, and it's all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And so Melissa has put up the list of items that are being approved. We've taken Meadowwood out, and then the rest of it is the same, correct? All the way through? And so I would need a motion. I can take one motion for all of these. Melissa?
I would recommend just reading resolve that the Board of Finance recommends and approve the following and reading those, reading them individually.
Okay. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the following, the general purpose projects for bonds listed on this page. Do you want me to read all of them? Melissa?
If you could.
Okay. I just don't have to read all the words on the next page. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
That's correct. Yep.
All right. So the general purpose projects, parking and accessibility improvements at Simsbury Meadows, $700,000. Highway pavement management, bonding, $605,000, cash, $200,000, and low SIP grant, $156,500. Town aid road grant, $243,500. The total is $1,205,000. Sidewalk reconstruction, $200,000. General purpose projects through grants. North End sidewalk construction, $810,000. Sewer use assessment funds and grants. Sewer liners, $600,000. Berm improvements, $3,250,000. Woodland Street Hot Meadow upgrade, $1,200,000. District security improvements, $250,000. SHS bleachers press box improvements, $600,000. Renovation and expansion of Latimer Lane School, $36,792,406. And then the specific resolutions thereafter, I do not have to read, and we've eliminated the one for Meadowwood.
Point of order.
Yes.
In the past, bond counsel has required us to read those resolutions. Can we get confirmation from Melissa on that? Is that a change?
The text at the very top is standard. She always puts that in there, and that specifically waives the reading of all that detail in the back. So you approve the projects, but you waive the reading of, and that's, as long as I've been here, that's read the same way.
That is consistent with what we've done in the past, Lisa.
And just I'm looking at the new resolutions. Did we change Latimer to 20-year bonds?
You all still have to discuss and vote on that as part of this resolution.
Okay.
So we're not ready to vote on the resolutions until we discuss that? Right.
Okay. So we have often discussed this, but we've never actually had a motion and a second and an approval on agreeing to allow the bonds to be repaid over 20 years for Latimer Lane. So I would need a motion to that effect.
I'll move that.
And a second?
I will second.
All right, seconded by Art. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So that passes.
I was opposed, Rob.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Kevin is opposed. So now we'll make the amendment on the page. They're not numbered, of course.
I think you're good. I think with that change, since you waived the reading of the full text, you're approving the project. I think you have a separate vote on the term. So I think you're okay.
Okay, great. Is that it?
Did you actually second and vote on this that you just read?
Up at the top? Oh, let's do that. So the resolve that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the following, and I read all of the following.
Mm-hmm.
And I need someone to move that.
I'll move that.
Was that you, Linda?
Yep,
All right, Linda moved it. Somebody seconded it?
Derek.
I'll second.
Derek seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. So these all pass, and they will go to resolution to the referendum. I need a motion to close the public hearing on the budget.
Oh, come on, let's stay a little longer. I move that we close the public hearing.
Well, we're not done yet. So we have a motion and a second. Somebody, Art moved and Linda seconded. How's that?
Yep, perfect.
Okay.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. On our agenda, wherever the heck that goes, we need to appoint the auditor for fiscal year 2021. The name has changed, but the people are the same. The old Bloom Shapiro is now called, what's it called?
Clifton Larson Allen LLP.
Okay, so I need a motion to hire them as our accountants for the fiscal 2021 audit.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any comments on the minutes? I think they were well done and good, accurate today. All right.
Great. Agreed.
All right. So we usually don't do a motion for this. We'll just approve the minutes as submitted. And then we have communications, which we've been provided. And I think that the last thing we need to do is have a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.